Sprint Challenge. We are under qualifying conditions, and as you can see here at the fantastic Estoril circuit in Portugal, it is pretty tricky stuff at the moment as the drivers have headed out onto the circuit. Very different conditions from what we saw last week for the first of our 2024 Endurance Challenge races. Last week it was sunny and hot. This weekend it is a bit of a damp squib at the moment in qualifying. Rain all around the circuit, and it's looking rather akin to the conditions that we saw back in 1985 when the great Ayrton Senna da Silva won his first ever Formula One race here back in 1985. Jake Sanson in the commentary box with you once again. Now, there's already going to be a few penalties that are handed out for the first race. Israel Salman, Leonardo Sanchez and Elsie Feldman have all carried penalties for the starting grid into this one. So that is obviously going to apply once the session has concluded. We're obviously into the depths of qualifying at the moment, but everybody has only completed their installation lap in these conditions, although for the sake of argument, Eduardo Menossi is currently looking at the fastest time from Gustavo Janon, Bruno Campos, Edu Guedes, Israel Salman now coming up to third position though, finishing his lap on a 2-minute 2.333. So the laps are going to start to tumble depending on when the drivers are going to get confidence in their cars in wet conditions. A reminder to everybody who may not be familiar with the Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil qualifying situation, or of course how the battles are played out in qualifying. They're actually separated by their individual classes. So we've got the rookies out there on the course at the moment, hence why we only have the likes of Eduardo Menossi, Gustavo Janon, Paulo Sousa, Israel Salman, Bruno Campos, Edu Guedes, Gustavo Farah, Piero Cipollari, and Leonardo Sanchez. Everybody else is waiting to get out on the course, but you really have to feel for the rookie class because they are the first ones out on the circuit in these horrendous conditions. And this is a circuit that really doesn't lend itself to good grip in wet conditions anyway. So Eduardo Menossi, having just bagged in a 1:58.942, managing to deal with the situation a little bit better than some of his counterparts. There is the 25, that is Paulo Sousa, currently sat behind Bruno Campos, trying to find a way through. Now there is the number 85 car, that is the car that's currently leading the qualifying session, Eduardo Menossi, and 1 week ago, this was the car that he was sharing with Antonio Felix da Costa of the Porsche Formula E team. Of course, Antonio Felix da Costa is not here anymore. He's obviously departed to Portland, ready for the penultimate round of the Formula E World Championship. But he had a lot of fun here last week. Managed to push the car the way things stand at the moment. Eduardo Menossi leads the way with Gustavo Janon in second place now from Paulo Sousa, who is the third driver in the standings at the moment and has a 2-minute flat 0.857. We've got a replay. Something has happened here. That's how easy it is to swap ends. And Paulo Sousa is going into the barrier. Shouldn't be a season-ending incident or a weekend. In fact, it isn't. Look, he's already reversed out and gone back onto the circuit again. So not bad at all from Paulo Sousa. Yes, okay, he's made the mistake in turn 3, but at least he hasn't put himself out of the session to do so. So there is Paulo Sousa just getting himself back up to speed again in the number 25 Elefanta Porsche. Gustavo Janon's just taken the lead of the session, a 1:58.53. You're going to see this over the course of the remaining couple of minutes as the drivers get more confidence in the car, more confidence in themselves. They're going to find a little bit more pace, a little bit more speed in the machinery. And Gustavo Janon does a 1:58.53. Now comes Edu Guedes. He's done a 1:58.43. Sorry, a 1:58.48, I should say. And that puts him to the top spot, 54 thousandths of a second quicker than Gustavo Janon. So there is the number 9, the Boss Porsche, with its beautiful white, gold and blue livery. And Edu Guedes has now taken the lead of the qualifying session at this point. Gustavo Janon second. Eduardo Menossi no longer in third position. I was going to say he was in P3, but Leonardo Sanchez has just beaten his time. A 0.087 deficit. So 1:58.567 then for Leonardo Sanchez. That's a good lap, to be fair. And now there's only 2 cars that have not managed to lap the circuit in less than 2 minutes up to this point. And that is the rookie superstar, Israel Salman, who's won pretty much everything there is to win this year up to this point. apart from the odd couple of races. And Piero Cifali. So Piero Cifali is still on a 2-minute 4.5. And hopefully he should work his way further forward. On screen at the moment, you're watching Leonardo Sanchez trying to work his way further forward in the UBS car, hoping that he can make a little bit more headway. And Gustavo Janon currently second right. Israel Salman is now at Estoril. So this man, Bruno Campos, has now set the new fastest lap in the Porto 33. And that's a 150. Oh, well, he was. Now Eduardo Minossi's gone quicker. A 156.473. So a 156.473 now puts Eduardo Minossi back on top by 1.2 seconds. What was it? They had a few minutes before. So while Bruno Campos had the lead briefly, Eduardo Minossi has now taken it back again. Edu Guedes P3, Gustavo Janon in fourth, and then it is Leonardo Sanchez, Israel Salman, Gustavo Parra, Paulo Sousa, and Piero Cifali in ninth position. Piero Cifali, by the way, has not actually improved on his previous best time of a 2-minute 4.552. I wonder if he's actually pitted the car, because he should be a much quicker lap time sort of pace than he's currently on. Time runs down to 0, so the lap that they're on, they can complete. But it's certainly not looking particularly rosy for Piero Cifali unless he's on a fast lap. I can't see him out there. So I would guess, yeah, he's crossed the line because he's in pit lane. So 2:03.913 is his final time. That's not where he wanted to be at all. But anybody who's on a quick time can finish the lap now. So Edu Guedes did a 23.1 for the first sector. That's pretty good, actually. 22.8 for Gustavo Janon. Now, that could be good enough to start flirting with the provisional pole time if he can keep the lap flowing. Here is Bruno Campos. He's still on the lap. Is he going to pit it? No, he's going to keep it going all the way to the line, as is Gustavo Janon. What's he done in terms of his pace? Fastest time of all in Sector 1. Fastest time of all in Sector 3 comes in from Bruno Campos, and he finishes up on a 1:57.7. No change there, unfortunately. His ideal time is a 1:57.4, as Eduardo Minossi does a 1:56.4. So he's gone even quicker. So a really good lap time there from Eduardo Minossi to finish off. And that's a really good end, as Gustavo Janon finishes up with a 1:57.90. So that is that. So in the rookie category, Piero Cifali. Now we're going to get the sport drivers out onto the circuit. And then, of course, after that, we'll have the challenge drivers go out for their session. And then it will be a case of who is in the top 8 positions, I do believe. And then whoever is in the top 8, they will then quest for pole position. You do occasionally get drivers in the sport category questing for the pole position overall against the Carrera Cup drivers. So it does happen from time to time. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all continues and how it all plays out. So we're going to see a really exciting battle. There is Leandro getting himself ready for an exciting run out on the course. Werner Neugebauer just talking tactics and strategy after his fantastic run last week with Rubens Barrichello in the endurance race. Worth going back and having a look at that, actually. I have to say, it's one of the best endurance races for a one-make championship that I've ever seen. It was so exciting. Pedrinho Aguar has joined up the championship. He wasn't here last week at Business Affairs by the look of it. But it's great to see Pedrinho Aguar back into the championship once again, ready for his run in the sport qualifying session. There's Eduardo Minossi's car, currently the fastest of the rookies, and of course shall remain there. And the 2 grids for the 2 races, one today, one tomorrow, will be set based on the times that have come out of this session. But a good positive start then for Eduardo Minossi, 1:56.473, the benchmark that he has set. You can see just how different the Estoril circuit looks this week compared to last. If you were watching last week, it was an absolute sun trap. Here, it's a bit of a lagoon. So Eduardo Minossi very happy with his work as he comes in and chats away to Marcel Muller, I do believe, who is, of course, getting himself ready for a run in the Carrera Cup. And once the qualifying session in Carrera Cup for all 3 categories plus the top 8 is concluded, then we'll go straight into the battle for the pole position in the sprint challenge races as well, again separated by 3 classes, and then an overall run for pole position. We'll talk about that in some detail, but certainly the pole position in rookie going the way of Edoardo Menossi, the man who partnered Antonio Felix da Costa in this car last week here at Estoril in the endurance race. Antonio not able to stay a second week because he's got a championship to fight for in Formula E this weekend at Portland in Oregon. So that'll be exciting to see what he can do. But here in Portugal on the Estoril circuit, the former Formula One venue, of course, it hosted the Portuguese Grand Prix here from 1984 all the way through till 1996. A lot of great races took place on that circuit through those years. All sorts of drivers winning the Grand Prix, including Ayrton Senna da Silva, who won the race here back in 1985 in similar conditions, I have to say, to what we've currently got out on the circuit here. Gustavo Fara in the gorgeous Denga Porsche in its silver with rainbow livery. He's very happy with that. It was a very good run at the end there to snatch second position away from Bruno Campos. He left it till the very last minute, and a 1:57.646 from Gustavo Fara. He's got every reason to be happy with the way that that final session, that final lap concluded. So he's in a good position right the way to the last, and he can be very pleasantly surprised and happy with the way that final qualifying lap ended up. So we've got 2 qualifying groups left in the Carrera Cup before we go to the final showdown for the pole position. Edoardo Menossi got the pole in rookie. Who is going to get the pole position in the sport category? Now, we do occasionally, as I mentioned before, get drivers in the sport category battling away for the overall pole position as well as the class pole. Drivers Edu Guedes in the number 9 getting himself ready, and there is Pedrinho Aguar, who is just gearing up for his own run. I love this livery. It's so simple, so perfect. White with a blue stripe and the gold stripe. And there is Nelson Montero getting himself ready for a run in the Monte Bravo Porsche number 87. So it'll be fascinating to see how the drivers get themselves ready for the continuation of time qualifying. You may also spot in the mix there Yosimar Junior, very distinguishable, that car, because it actually carries the colours of the helmet design of the late great Ayrton Senna. I have to say, those colours wrapped around a Porsche Carrera Cup car look absolutely stunning, and it really is wonderful to observe. There's Lineu Perez. He's getting himself ready for qualifying in the Treble 8 Mapfre car. Very, again, distinguishable to notice with its very light green insignia. Good run in the session there from Bruno Campos. That's his car, having finished up for the moment, probably finished up for the day as well, certainly for the morning, I should say, as well, because they do have race 1 later this afternoon, which of course will be bringing you Lineu Perez. And you can see in the background there, Piero Cifali. I didn't quite see what happened with Cifali's car during qualifying, but he just didn't get a decent lap together, even for his very esteemed talents. 2 minute 3.913 was the best he could get, which was about 7.4 away from the pace set by Edoardo Menossi. Not entirely sure where his pace disappeared to. And it looks like there is a penalty. There's a penalty. And that is going to Edoardo Menossi. So a penalty is going to be handed out to the provisional pole sitter. Edoardo Menossi is going to be penalised, and it's to do with the speed down pit lane, I do believe. My Portuguese is very minimal, but penalizado com a perda de maior volta por cruzar a faixa branca de entrada de box. I think that means that he was too fast in pit lane coming into his box. The time that's stated to have happened is 10:45, which is only just recently. There's the confirmation on the screen. So he has got a penalty. So that's disastrous for Edoardo Menossi. That means his best lap time has been deleted. And now the very jubilant Gustavo Fara has been elevated to pole position in class. He'll be even more delighted. So Edoardo Menossi now drops all the way to 7th, thanks to his best time being deleted. So very unfortunate. Right, now we go into the second session of the qualifying, and this is for the sport drivers. So we've got Rumen Zimkovic, Francisco Horta, Ryan Mascarallo is back in town. He missed it last week, unfortunately. Nelson Marcondes, Yosimar Junior in that gorgeous Ayrton Senna tribute livery. Carlos Campos, Diogo Farao, Peter Ferter, Georgios Frangoulis, Jose Maria Marreiros, Marcos Regadas, Leandro Martins, Lineu Perez, and Nelson Montero. And of course, with them being sport drivers compared to rookie drivers, they have a good chance of being able to outperform the rookies, unless, of course, more rain falls on the circuit. Then it becomes very much a case of who's got the nerve to keep it on the road. I know for a fact that Gustavo Fara would quite like a little bit more rain to fall, because obviously the top 8 drivers battle for the overall pole position. Right, we've got a replay of something straight away here out of the sport category. Oh, this is Eduardo Menossi. Now, it's got nothing to do with the speed on the way into the pits. It's the way he came back into the pits very late, and he actually traversed the white line on the entry to the pits. That is not legal, I'm afraid. So that's why his best lap time has been deleted. You've got to make a safe and clear entry to the pits. You cannot be over that limit, over that line. And I'm afraid to say that that's backfired massively for Eduardo Menossi, who was looking at pole position in the rookie category, but his best time has been deleted for an unsafe arrival in pit lane. And that's devastating. Eduardo Menossi is going to be very unhappy about that. There isn't a lot he can do. We're on board with Giorgio Frangoulis, and this is how tricky it is in these conditions to be able to see out the windscreen. I don't think people really take into account how tricky it is. If you're driving along on the motorway and it's raining and it's heavy, your windscreen mists up. It's exactly the same in a race car. And the problem is, in these Porsche Carrera Cup cars, there's very little you can actually do about it. You can't just flick the aircon on and demist it. That's not how racing cars work. Now, there are channels that make it easier for the car. Whoa! That is what you call big opposite lock from Georgios Frangoulis. Oh my goodness, that's a big tack slapper for a Porsche. And that's about as close to the limit of throwing it into the barriers as you can possibly get without actually doing so. That was tricky for Georgios Frangoulis. Wow, he really flirted with disaster there, to be fair. Now we're watching Leandro Martins in the 911 Biavida car. Now he's hoping for a little bit more than he got last week. Our Portuguese pit lane reporter down there in pit lane, obviously keeping an eye on the likes of Franco Giaffoni and Werner Neugebauer. Unfortunately, we can't be privy to what he's saying because he's doing so in a completely different language to us. But we'll try and keep on top of all the latest as it happens. Certainly the big news at the moment during the qualifying session is that Eduardo Menossi, who was pole position in the rookie category, has had his time disallowed for traversing the white line on the entry to the pit lane in what is judged to be an unsafe manner. And as a result of that, his time has been deleted. So he is down to 7th position, and that puts Gustavo Fara into provisional pole position. However, the sport drivers are now out onto the circuit. They're going to be pushing their limits around the course. They're going to be doing a fair job to work themselves into a good position. And as a result of that, they're going to be... we've got 3 wide into the first corner in qualifying. Well, that's brave. And obviously that's 3 drivers who want a decent qualifying lap and are not prepared to give best to each other. Well, fortunately, the 199 out of harm's way there, Nelson Marcondes. As up to 3rd comes Francisco Horta with his first flying lap, a 157.8. As we look at the 992, that's Jose Maria Marreiros. So one of the only Portuguese drivers in the field. Last week, of course, it was him and Antonio Felix da Costa, I do believe. But because we're here in Estoril, we're in Portugal rather than in Brazil as we usually, as long as we usually are, the drivers are essentially being given a nice invitation to be here and racing. So we've got a few Portuguese drivers taking part this weekend. And there is Jose Maria Marreiros, just trying to get himself up to speed. At the moment, it is Francisco Horta who is making the biggest impression from the sport category. His time was a 157.8, and that was just his banker lap, don't forget. So we're going to go a lot quicker than that. There is the 22 in the colours of the Brazilian flag. So that is Ryan Mascarello. Do you remember a few weeks ago, he had that fantastic run in qualifying in the Sport Challenge at Velocita and actually managed to steal the overall pole position, never mind the sport pole. But he actually went quicker than the Carrera Cup drivers and was able to hang on despite all the pressure from the Carrera Cup drivers to take his maiden win. I do believe it was his maiden win overall in Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. But a fantastic performance from Ryan Mascarello then. He's going to find it much trickier to do so here. But he's going to come across the line. and he's looking for a decent time. Is it going to go quicker than everybody else in the mix? Certainly does. 1:57.323 for Ryan Mascarallo. And Carlos Campos has come across the line and gone even quicker, a 1:57.250. So the sport drivers easily outpacing the competitors. Another penalty coming in, and that's for the 33. That's Bruno Campos from the previous session. So Bruno Campos is penalised, and that seems to be for an incident involving Israel Salmen in the previous qualifying session. So it looks to me as though we're going to lose the best time from the number 33 of Bruno Campos. So he's not going to be second either. So that's going to drop him down, most likely behind Leonardo Sanchez, Edu Guedes, and Gustavo Janon. So there is the confirmation, the penalty going the way of Bruno Campos. Meanwhile, this man, Leandro Martins, that's Francisco Horta. He's now third overall. He's done a 1:57.15. Georges Frangoulis has a 1:57.01 in second place. But the new pole sitter is Leandro Martins, who's done a 1:56.939. So Linu Perez has just done his lap. That's good enough for 8th at the moment. He's got a lot more in the tank than that, though. That's Linu Perez. He's not going to be satisfied by finishing as low down as that. So you can bet your bottom dollar he's going to be finding a little bit more in the car as it continues to progress. 4 minutes left in this particular session, this particular group. I'm a little disappointed with Yosemar Junior's pace. He hasn't quite found the sub 2 minute mark yet in the Ayrton Senna colours. As we look at the 87, that is the Monte Bravo car of the very talented Nelson Montero, although it's not quite gone his way yet. He hasn't found the confidence in the car yet. He's done a 1:59.1, but that is still a good 2.5 seconds away from pace. But it's so difficult. I mean, if you try to run your car at top speed, your road car at top speed in the wet conditions, you're really going to struggle to get the car dialed in. Think about the fact that this is a Porsche with a heck of a lot more horsepower. Okay, the tyres are better designed to cope with the conditions, but even so, all you've got is your instinct and your reactions, and the drivers will know if you get on the throttle a little early in these cars, you're going to be swapping ends and getting dizzy like you're inside a washing machine drum. It's not easy. Leandro Martins tippy-toeing his way through the slow motion apex. Now, commentators can't do a massive amount to prepare for commentating on a certain type of championship unless they get in the cars themselves. Now, I can't do that, but what I did do in the week is get on the simulator and drove the Porsche Carrera Cup car for about an hour and a half around this circuit in both dry and wet conditions. And I can tell you that purely from a simulator perspective, these cars are so difficult to get right in the wet. You really have to be so patient. You've got to tiptoe your way around every apex and wait and wait and wait until you plant the throttle. And even then, you're giving it just a mere percentage of the throttle application that you normally would. Peter Vetter now goes top. 1:56.694 for him with 2 minutes 30 on the clock. So Peter Vetter goes to the top spot. And that's by almost a quarter of a second that he's found that a little extra bit of pace. And again, that all comes from confidence. He's found a little bit more in the car, in the Agrachete car. Now, who's that's just gone through? That's Linu Perez in the treble 8. He's now 4th, so he's just knocking on the door of Georges Frangoulis, braking very late. Did you see the way the car just snaked under braking? Very tricky to get that right. And goodness me, Linu Perez definitely running the gauntlet, but he wants to go top spot, so of course he will. Sector 1, fastest of all in Sector 1 is now Georges Frangoulis. He's done a 22.7 in the first sector, but on the previous run, he was a good 3 seconds away from that. So this lap is not going to compete with that. However, Gustavo Fara still has, incredibly, the fastest Sector 2, and he's the pole sitter in rookie. So with just a handful of seconds to go in the qualifying session, nobody in sport has actually been able to find a better Sector 2 than the drivers in rookie, which is interesting. Now, Rumen Zimkovic has just done the best final sector of anybody, a 36.316, and that's good enough to put him into 10th position. So I'm afraid none of the rookies are going to be fighting for the overall pole position, but I don't think any of them assumed they were. So just following in behind Nelson Marcondes, we've got the 65 car. Now, this is the A-car machine of Diego Ferrao. I think he is one of the local drivers here in Portugal. One of our visitors, as it were. Indeed he is. You can just about see the Portuguese flag on the top of the frame there as he came through, sliding around all over the place because the rain has actually returned. It's not easing up. If anything, it's actually getting heavier. So that's going to make the top 10 shootout, or the top 8 shootout later. Look at the fog that's coming through across the circuit as well. That's not going to help things. Leniu Perez coming down the straight, moving up to second position on a 156.7, but braking for that first corner is agonizingly slow compared to what it is in the dry. And just look at the damp patches all around the course. He's really struggling to get this car turned in. So Peter Ferter, currently pole position. Leniu Perez second from Leandro Martins. Georges Frangoulis, Francisco Horta, and Carlos Campos in the top 6, just ahead of Marcos Regadas. 3, 2, 1. Time is up for the sport drivers. That's their group over. So if they're on a flying lap, they can make progress. Interestingly, Diego Ferrao is now the fastest driver in Sector 1 and Sector 2. So Diego Ferrao is one to watch here. He could well be the new pole position sitter. Here he comes out of the final turn in the 65, the 8-car machine. And if he keeps this final sector going strong, Diego Ferrao is going to shoot straight to the top of the timesheets. Full of confidence, the checkered flag is out. What does he do? Boom! 156.072. That is a big gain on the other drivers. And that's local knowledge, you see. In the Racar machine, Diego Ferrao has gone top spot. He knows the circuit better than the Brazilian drivers do. So this is a perfect launch forward from Diego Ferrao, who goes fastest ahead of Peter Ferter and Ryan Mascarello, who now pops up with a 156.731, just a few hundredths of a second quicker than an improved time from Leniu Perez. Rumen Zimkovic is just at the fastest third sector of anybody. Nelson Montero's just at the fastest second sector, I should say, compared to anybody else. So definitely big improvements coming there. And up to second comes Leandro Martins. He does a 156.680. So he's found a few more hundredths of a second than Peter Ferter. But this isn't over yet. There's still a few drivers out there setting personal bests and even session bests. Nelson Montero has gone quicker than anybody in Sector 2. So he's about to shoot up. Peter Ferter gets out of the car. Now in the knowledge of the fact that he's down to third. Leandro Martins has come into the pits. This is Martins' car, I do believe. And coming down pit road, I think that's going to be Diego Ferrao. Oh, no, it's not. My apologies. So that is Leniu Perez. Leniu Perez parks the car in the pits, and he is P6 behind an improved Marcos Regadas and Ryan Mascarello. But there's Peter Ferter's car in the Agora Porsche, number 56. So that's good enough for third place at the moment. Not seeing signs of any penalties being handed out to the drivers in the sport category. We saw 2 penalties in the rookie category, one that deleted Eduardo Menossi's best time. I think Bruno Campos's best time has been deleted as well. The problem for everybody else is that his second best time was good enough to keep him in P2. So that really hasn't changed anything as far as the rookies are concerned. It's still there or thereabouts at the moment. So there is Peter Ferter, third position behind Diogo Ferrao and Leandro Martins. Peter Ferter third from Ryan Mascarello, then Marcos Regadas, Leniu Perez, Georges Frangoulis, 8th is Francisco Horta, 9th is Rumen Zimkovic, and 10th is Carlos Campos. And despite the wet conditions, they're all covered by 1.1 seconds. Then it is 11th place for Jose Maria Mareros, Nelson Montero, P12. The only other 2 drivers from that session in the sport category were Nelson Marcondes, who couldn't beat the times set by Gustavo Fara or Bruno Campos. And rather unfortunate for Yosimar Junior, he just had no confidence in the car whatsoever. And he was slower than Leonardo Sanchez, Edu Guedes, Gustavo Janon, Israel Salman, and Eduardo Menossi, despite Menossi's best time being deleted. So the only drivers that were slower than Yosimar Junior, rather sadly, were Paolo Sousa and Piero Cifali, and both of them had problems by the look of it. So into the pits comes Diego Ferrao in the Racar machine. Pole position for the guest. Not a bad run, and a very hospitable championship Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil has been for Diogo Ferrao, not just in the paddock, but also on the racetrack. He's unlocked another 0.6 of a second that the regular drivers have not yet been able to find. So an excellent run then from the Racar machine. It's an unusual championship, this, of course, because in most forms of motor racing, you have individual teams that are entered, but it's not quite the way it works here in Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil, because they all basically run under the Porsche banner of Carrera Cup Brazil. And the mechanics are all distributed amongst the Porsche paddock. So they don't really have individual teams. It's all just individual cars. Rather, basically, it is all one team. A bit like the way that FIA F4 runs in France. You know, there are no individual teams. They all just run under the same banner. And that was really interesting as a dynamic last week in Portugal during the endurance race, because, of course, they were not racing in individual teams. They were racing in individual cars. And there were quite a few spare cars that were utilized due to mechanical difficulties in the middle of the endurance race last year. So drivers were actually swapping cars, a bit like you do in rental karting if it doesn't quite go to plan. So Diogo Farao, the local star, able to get pole position provisionally for the interesting one, because 0.6 of a second is a big jump compared to the other drivers in sport. So Diogo Farao, that time of a 1:56.072 in these conditions, that could be the overall pole position. It could be tricky for the Carrera Cup drivers in the Premier category to mix it up for pole position with a time of 1:56.0 to beat. That's going to be a tough challenge for our drivers in the Carrera Cup category. Well, regardless, the third session, which is the Carrera Cup drivers, are now heading out onto the circuit. You can see how tricky it is. The mist and the fog are still here over Estoril, and the rain is coming down and still relatively heavy. So we've got drivers heading out onto the circuit. There's Rodrigo Melo heading his way down pit lane to join the circuit, as Leandro Martins has got himself out of the car, and so too is this man, Diogo Farao. The reporter is going straight to Diogo Farao in the hope to get a very happy local driver, but will he stay in pole position? We'll find out in the next 11 minutes, because the time is still ticking down as the drivers head out onto the circuit in Carrera Cup. We've got Lucas Salas, we've got Werner Neugebauer, we've got Franco Giafone, we've got Rodrigo Melo, we've got Christian Hahn, we've obviously got Alsu Feldman in the number 1 Tag Heuer Porsche. Gorgeous car, that, as the local reporter is chatting away to the provisional pole sitter, Diogo Farao, who clearly has the home advantage over some of his counterparts in the Carrera Cup Challenge grid. But certainly the way things currently look for Diogo Farao, he can be very positive about the lap he's unlocked. Marcel Muller is, of course, in this field as well. The 544 just making his way out of pit lane now as well. There he is, onto the left of your screen on the inset. And also making his way down pit lane, that's Miguel Peludo, who did such a great job last week here. He had a fantastic performance in the Carrera Cup category. As we watch Lucas Salas, who was not bad last week, but I think he wants a little bit more than that in the Wish Porsche number 70. So we'll be hoping for a little bit more to come from this particular category, as everyone is looking forward to a good pair of races later this weekend. The first of those coming up this evening, of course, and then the second one during the lunchtime period of tomorrow. And I'm speaking lunchtime on British time, because Portuguese time is identical to Portuguese time. They're in the same time zone. So those watching in Europe, it will basically be taking place about 1 o'clock tomorrow in continental Europe. And then for the British viewers, you'll get to watch this bang on the same time as Portugal, because it's the same time zone. Who else is coming out onto the circuit? Well, we also have Tiago Vavacqua in the number 10 car. He's out on the course as well. So Tiago Vavacqua also part of the Carrera Cup category. And I think that's all 9 of them. I'm not sure that there's a 10th. And oh no, there is, of course, because there's Pedrinho Aguar. We saw him resting in pit lane earlier on, and now Pedrinho Aguar is actually coming out of pit lane a little bit after everybody else. But that gives him a little bit of a chance to warm up the car and get himself into a better position. Now, 1:56.072. That is going to be difficult. That is going to be very tricky for the other drivers to beat. That's a full 0.6 of a second quicker than Martins, Ferter, and Ryan Mascarello, as well as Linu Perez. And they were all separated by a few hundredths of a second. They were maximizing everything they could out of the car in wet conditions. But of course, Diogo Farao knows the circuit better than everybody, because he's a Portuguese national rather than a Brazilian national. Knows the track, knows how slippery and tricky it can be here, as we watch Marcel Muller trying to dial in the Farben Patros car that was so competitive last week in the endurance race. They so nearly claimed the victory. They had a fantastic battle with Werner Neugebauer and Rubens Barrichello in that car last week. And of course, it was the ex-Ferrari and Brawn Grand Prix winner, Rubens Barrichello, teamed up with Werner Neugebauer, that was able to take the victory a week ago. Very different racetrack this compared to last week. I mean, it's the same place, it's the same layout, but in the weather conditions we've got, it might as well be a completely different race circuit. So it's going to be tricky for the 10 Carrera Cup drivers to battle for position, and we'll have 33 drivers in total racing in the Carrera Cup races this weekend, and it is, of course, the sprint races rather than a full endurance. There is the 26th, the Blau car of Christian Hahn. Good to see him back at the sharp end. We didn't really see much of him last week. They had all sorts of problems in the Blau car. Ooh, bit of a run wide there on the penultimate turn as they come up to the Parabolica Ayrton Senna, which was renamed in the legendary Brazilian's honour. Of course, this is the race circuit that 39 years ago, Ayrton Senna won his maiden Grand Prix in Formula One on this very circuit in what I have to say is actually very similar weather conditions to what we've currently got here. And interestingly, Christian Hahn moving across there to the pit wall rather than to the racing line. Now, it's interesting, in the wet conditions, you don't really put the car on the racing line in quite the same way that you do in dry conditions, because in the dry, you've got a racing line that's laid down there on the normal optimal racing line, and it's helped and assisted there by the rubber that goes down. When the rubber comes off the tyres and melds its way into the tarmac, it almost creates a bit of a guide plate, a bit like a slot car, if you like. But in the wet conditions, if you've got water on top of that racing line, that's actually the most abrasive, the most slippery part of the road. So you'll see a lot of the drivers actually come off the racing line and go for something a little bit more unique as far as a position to drive the car, because you'll actually find a little bit more acceleration, you'll find a bit more purchase, and the downforce that's naturally produced by these cars being top heavy is actually really useful in these weather conditions. So Christian Hahn has come straight out of the pits, banged in a time, and it's a 1:54.4. So that debate about whether Diogo Ferrao was going to be able to hold on to the pole position, that was a bit short-lived, as Marcel Müller gets a 1:55, I think it's going to be by the time he comes across the line. Yes, it's a 1:55.521 for Marcel Müller, a second away from the pole, but this is still very early days. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all continues to progress. We're still having a very interesting one here. As across the line comes Miguel Peludo. His banker lap is a 2:03.79, but hey, look, we've still got a long way to go as the Brandt Porsche number 7 comes through. Everybody just putting in their first banker. Christian Hahn, 1:54.462 then, as Thiago Vavacqua comes up to 4th on a 1:56.529. So that's half a second away from Diogo Ferrao. But how many drivers are going to be able to displace Diogo Ferrao? That's the key factor here, because it's the top 8 drivers, I do believe, that go through to the final pole position shootout. As up to 4th comes Franco Giaffoni now. He just goes quicker than Thiago Vavacqua. We watch Miguel Peludo, as Rodrigo Melo has just displaced him. And we still haven't really seen the best yet from Elsie Feldman in the number 1 Tag Heuer Porsche. Or we haven't really seen the best yet from Pedrinho Aguar, although he has set his first banker lap, and it's a pretty good one. There's Rodrigo Melo going across the line in the FI2 bet car. So the FizzBet machine, if you like. They always like to come up with shorthanded names for these cars, because of course they don't have teams in Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. So I guess you just essentially have to refer to them as the primary corporate partner on the car. So some of these cars are very easy to identify. I quite like to refer to the Josimar Jr. car as the Senna Porsche, because he's painted it in the same helmet colours as Ayrton Senna. It doesn't seem appropriate to call it anything else, really. So up to 11th has come Werner Neugebauer, the winner last week in the endurance race, coupled up with Rubens Barrichello. They shared the car last week. So interesting stuff for them thus far. 4 minutes to go in this particular session. And then obviously at the end of this 4 minutes, we'll get to see which drivers actually progress through to the pole position shootout for the Carrera Cup. And then, of course, after all this, we do it all again with the Sprint Challenge drivers, and that's where we see the very talented female champion of last year, Antonella Bassani, still only 18 years of age, a great talent for the future, and certainly hoping to become Brazil's next Porsche driver at the Le Mans 24 Hours in years to come, and she's got a very good chance of doing that. There's Müller. Melo, I should say. Marcel Müller's come up to 2nd, but who is on a fast time at the moment? Well, the fastest ever in 3rd sector is Thiago Vavacqua. Fastest in Sector 1 is Marcel Müller. Fastest in Sector 2 is Christian Hahn. So they've laid down a gauntlet. They haven't really improved on the previous lap, though, so that's going to change. In fact, Hahn, Müller and Müller have come into the pits already. They've clearly decided, well, we've got 1 lap. We've gone quicker. We don't need to worry about another fast lap. Some of the other drivers in the mix, of course, have stayed out on the circuit because they want to find a faster lap time. There goes Melo. What has he done? It's a 1:58.3. That's a long way from pace. That's a good 4 seconds slower, as there is Pedrinho Aguar. And Agora has done a 1:57.5, so not quite comparable to what he's done before. There's a bit of a shuffle of the deck as here comes Alcy Feldman. He jumps up to 8th. So Alcy Feldman on a 1:56.713. And it's all about confidence. That's the thing. This session is not about speed. It's about confidence in the car. You've got to know that the car is going to turn in when you ask it to. Here is Miguel Peludo in the Brandt Porsche number 7, looking to find a bit more pace. There's Alcy Feldman in the Tag Heuer machine. Now, Alcy Feldman had a very good run of it last week. It was good to see the Tag Heuer driver putting in a good show. Looking to see what else can be done in the closing 2 minutes of the session. Well, again, as I said before, it just all comes down to who's got the confidence in the car, who's willing to push it to the limit. As we just saw Thiago Vivacqua chasing down we just saw Thiago Vivacqua chasing down Miguel Peludo, and Vivacqua's just gone second. He's just displaced Marcel Muller. A 1:55.487 for him, so that's a really good lap. And that puts him still a second away from Christian Hahn, who's clearly gone straight out and gone, no, enough of this. I'm going to put a decent lap in, and that's it. But Thiago Vivacqua now up to second place. What was Miguel Peludo's time? A 1:57.8. So still a good 3.4 away from the top spot. And it's interesting because I think we may get a couple of the rookies going through, a couple of the sport drivers, I should say, going through to the shootout, because Diogo Farao is still in 4th place at the moment. Leandro Martins is in P7 and Peter Ferter is in P8. So I think we could see some relatively good performances coming through there. Now they're just having a chat down in pit lane to, now who is that they're having a chat to? I think that's going to be Edu Guedes that they're having a natter with, because that's the Tech Bond colours. And the sister car, of course, is out there on the track at the moment. That is the car of Pedrinho Aguar in the number 20, the Tech Bond machine with its gorgeous colour scheme. Looking very strong out there at the moment. All of the competitors trying to put in an excellent show. 40 seconds left on the timer. And what can Alcy Feldman do? It's not quicker. It's a 1:57.0. His best is a 1:56.7. There is Miguel Peludo. So Miguel Peludo trying to find his way through the course. He wants to do a lot better than a 1:57.8 if he wants to be competitive for this race. Otherwise, he's going to be running around down at the tail end of the field. He really needs to find a bit more confidence in the car. Lucas Salas, his last time was a 1:59.7, having done a 1:57.8 previously to that. So he's really struggling to find some good speed and pace in the car. This looks like a better lap on the whole from Peludo. It's not fastest in every sector by any means, but it's certainly looking a little bit more confident, and it is. 12th place, 1:56.845. That's a bit more like it. Still nowhere near where he wants to be, but it's definitely out of the doldrums at the tail end of the field where Lucas Salas still finds himself. Always a little bit more awkward when you're a Carrera Cup driver and you're mixing it with the sport and rookie drivers. There's Pedrinho Aguar. So Pedrinho Aguar, who has joined us this week, having missed last week, unfortunately. He couldn't quite make it for the endurance race. But here he is, putting that gorgeous white Porsche with the gold and blue insignia. It's such a simple livery, but you know what? It looks spectacular. Sometimes simple and easy is the best way to go in terms of car design. But as you can see on the cameras, the rain is still falling here. So a lot of this is actually not down to the driver's skill. A lot of it is down to the fact that, you know, they're trying to go faster and faster on a circuit where more rain is coming. And yeah, Pedrinho Aguar has decided this is silly. I can't find any more. So he comes into the pits to finish off the session, doesn't complete the lap. And I don't think anybody else is really going to make any gains, because that first lap out of the pits was the fastest anybody could go. Mind you, not a bad run at the end there for Alcy Feldman. He pops up with a lap time good enough for P6 as Werner Neugebauer goes P4. So Neugebauer, the winner last week in the dry, in the endurance race alongside Rubens Barrichello, has come up to P4. So that's going to displace a couple more drivers. Can Miguel Peludo get himself into the top 8 and edge out Leandro Martins at least? He's trying to find a good lap together. What's he done in the sectors? Well, a 23.3 in sector 1, 57.3 in sector 2. That doesn't really suggest he's going to be going any quicker. So I think Miguel Peludo is actually going to be bringing this car into the pits. It's not going to be faster. He's still pushing it like he's going to go to the line. He is actually going to go to the line. So can Peludo make any gains? I don't think he's going to. And he doesn't. A 1:57.722. That's 9/10 of a second away from his best. So unfortunate there for Miguel Peludo. But it's all gravy for Christian Hahn and the Blauer Motorsport team. That car has already come into the pits. He did one lap and pitted it. He said, right, well, we've done enough. We've done a 154.4. The rain is coming. We don't need any more than that. So job done. So the top 10, after all three groups have gone out, Christian Hahn on a 154.462, a full second quicker than Thiago Vivacqua in second place in these torrential wet conditions. Marcel Müller in third place. Werner Neugebauer P4, and then Diogo Farao is P5 in front of Alsu Feldman, and then Franco Giafoni is P7 in front of Leandro Martins, Peter Ferter, and Ryan Mascarallo is in P10, just ahead of Lini Perez and Miguel Peludo. Nice conversation there with Christian Hahn, who of course is getting himself ready for the shootout now. Is already, having done just one lap, come into the pits and brought it back in again. No need to go and push the car further than it has to be. He obviously has a very interesting session to come. It's going to be a brief one, but he doesn't have to worry too much about the state of play because he's obviously in the best position, looking good for pole position. And he's a second quicker than anybody else as well. Thiago Vivacqua is on a 155.487, so has not really been able to make much of an impression. Lucas Salas walks away from his car bitterly disappointed. 27th. That's not great for a Carrera Cup driver, is it? Out of the 33 drivers, he is 27th. He's right in the middle of all the rookies. He'll be very disappointed. But Christian Hahn, number 26, Blau Porsche, fastest of all. And he only needed one lap to do it. 1 minute 54.462. Bang! Get the lap, bring it back in. Don't put the car in the wall. Get yourself ready for the shootout, which is exactly what he's done. So, obviously, the results in full in between qualifying and race one later this afternoon, you'll be able to find on the website, which is, of course, Porsche GT3 Cup.com.br, because, of course, it's the Brazilian websites now. So here we go then. Now, there is a couple of grid penalties coming into this weekend. We mentioned this at the top of the bill, but we can talk about it now in a bit more detail now that it's going to apply. Israel Salman has a 5-place grid penalty. Leonardo Sanchez has a 3-place grid penalty, and Alsu Feldman, who's way up in P6, has a 10-place grid penalty. Now, he's going through to the shootout, because obviously he's made it through to the shootout, but the 10-place grid penalty for Alsu Feldman will only apply when we figure out which position of the grid he's going to start in. So he's going to be part of this shootout for the pole position, but the best he can actually get on the starting grid is going to be 11th, because, of course, he has a 10-place grid penalty. So even if he gets the pole time, and at the moment, looking at the pace, he said a 156.238, which is about 1.7 away from Christian Hahn. It's not looking particularly likely that he's going to be in a position to start from the front end of the grid at all. At best, if it were to go like this, then Alsu Feldman would be starting from 16th on the grid for the race this afternoon. So we'll have to see what he can actually do as we keep an eye on Thiago Vivacqua. His lap time was a 155.487. He actually did a couple more laps than Christian Hahn did because he had to find that pace initially in the car. So an interesting lineup then for this shootout, because we've got Christian Hahn, who literally did one lap and parked it. Thiago Vivacqua, second position, had to work a little harder to get there. Marcel Müller, third position, did one lap and parked it. Werner Neugebauer had to work to get into 155.583 for a time. Diogo Farao, the local driver, obviously finding a lot more pace than the sport drivers here. There is Leandro Martins, one of the Portuguese drivers as well. He is going to be going through, I do believe, just in 8th position. There's Thiago Vivacqua. Now you can see there on the window, there's a little weight with 20 kg. That is a success ballast that he's got on that particular car. That's how things are kept relatively competitive in the world of the Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. You get success ballast based on how well you've done over the course of proceedings. It's quite a common thing in both one make and GT racing on the whole. If you've done a fair job, you want to make sure that other drivers and other teams have a chance to go for the victory. You don't want one driver running away with it. So if you carry success ballast, then obviously it makes it a little bit more even for people. As you can see from the 56 car, that is the machine that is being driven by the 56 car is Peter Ferter, isn't it? So he doesn't have any success ballast on the car. If he does, the number is certainly not written on the window anyway. And that's how usually you know what the difference is in the pace is. Great to see that the atmosphere hasn't changed in the last week, even though the weather has completely. Great to see that everybody's still having fun and games down there in pit lane and enjoying a very different weather condition. this week compared to last week. It was bone dry, sunny, and a bit of a holiday destination last week, as all of the phenomenal race drivers, and there were 85 of them, I do believe, competing last week. But this week, it's very different. A few of the drivers have disappeared. A lot of the guest drivers no longer here racing. They've gone back to their Stock Car Pro Brazil campaigns. And interestingly enough, that weekend is taking place this weekend as well in Velocita, which is a bit more home from home for these guys. Those who are watching along on Motorsport TV wanting to know what will happen with Stock Car Pro Brazil, well, don't worry. You'll get live coverage of that on Motorsport TV with my dear friend and colleague Alex Goldschmidt stepping into the commentary box alongside Carlos Costa for that one. But here in Porsche Cup Brazil, we're watching the battle for pole position, and it is the last hurrah for these contenders as they venture out to the end of the pit lane, ready for the shootout to begin. Christian Hahn, Thiago Vivacqua, Marcel Müller, Werner Neugebauer, Diogo Ferrao, Alcy Feldman, Franco Giaffoni, and Leandro Martins, as far as I'm aware, will be the drivers gunning for pole position. And that includes 2 drivers in the sports category, as we look at the pit box of Piero Ciufali and Lini Perez, I think that was as well. We're just having a word with Miguel Peludo, who was rather disappointed, didn't really get anything from that last run. The Brazilian driver in the Brandt Porsche, down in 12th position, wasn't able to get a decent lap, and so is out of the session, I'm afraid to say. So down in 12th position. It's a brutal qualifying procedure, this, in Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. You've got a really difficult method of going about it, and you have to be on your A game. You have to make sure you're not just the fastest in your category, you have to be amongst the fastest overall. And despite the problems earlier on, and despite how intense the weather conditions are, there's only one car that has not set a lap within 2 minutes, and that was Piero Ciufali, who did a 2-minute 3.913. The other cars lining up in pit road, ready for the shootout. And not surprisingly at all, the first one out onto the pit road is the man who is the local star, Diogo Ferrao. Now, we're watching Paulo Sousa on a replay. Are we just watching how the different drivers work their way through this chicane? Paulo Sousa had a bit of an off earlier on, of course, in the Elefante Porsche. Yeah, we're just seeing the different styles of drivers going through this rather fiddly chicane in the middle of the course. As we watch, I think that's Gustavo Janon doing the same thing, the number 24 car. Yes, it is Gustavo Janon, who is amongst the rookie drivers, of course. But different drivers have very different styles. You can see there, look, Bruno Campos staying right off the curb on the inside of the left-hander and getting as close to the curb without actually striking it in the right. So again, very different driving styles, and it all comes down to confidence in these conditions. There's Edu Guedes. Again, you don't really want to strike the curbs in these conditions. In the dry, they'd be hopping over those things, but in the wet conditions, you just don't want to risk it. Because obviously, if you go over those curbs at the wrong angle, you will be spat out and you'll end up in the barriers quicker than you can say, what on earth happened there? So now we've got the top 10 shootout. I was wrong, it was the top 10 rather than the top 8. So they've got 10 minutes out on the course to try and find the best possible pole position time. Now, obviously, the target for Alcy Feldman is to get pole position, as it is, of course, for everybody else. But it's even more important for Alcy Feldman to get it right because he's got a 10-place grid penalty. So if he gets pole position, the best he can start from is 11th on the grid. But obviously everybody else, including the Christian Hahns, the Thiago Vivacquas, the Werner Neugebauers and Marcel Müllers of this world, they are going to be gunning for the pole position because they're in the form to do so, and they'll want to take full advantage of the opportunity afforded them. There's Lini Perez. Look how tricky he found it going through the chicane. That's what happens when you get on the throttle a little early. It can really backfire on you. Here we go then. So we've got 3 sport drivers and 7 Carrera Cup drivers in this rotation of competitors. Diogo Ferrao, the local star who was quickest of the sport drivers. Christian Hahn, the man who was quickest of all. Ryan Mascarello, the man who won at Velocita overall and in sport earlier this year. The 2 cars who are of similar livery, Werner Neugebauer and Franco Giaffoni. And those were the cars that were being shared by Rubens Barrichello. Well, that was not the best execution of getting out of pit lane, was it, Leandro? I'm afraid to say you nearly clipped the pit wall there. So the mechanics obviously have to push him back into position again. Drivers chatting away and being pally, wondering what might have been. Alcy Feldman getting out on the course, although let's remind everybody that he's got a 10-place grid penalty to carry into this one. Leandro Martins in the 911 car has now made his way down pit road and joined the circuit, despite very nearly clipping the pit wall on the exit. Peter Ferter is going out on the circuit. So too is this man, Marcel Müller. He's a real contender for the pole position here, to be fair. But again, it'll all come down to how things feel on the circuit. During qualifying in these conditions, it's nothing short of a lottery. It all comes down to what the driver feels behind the wheel. Can they get decent purchase in the car? Can they find that extra bit of confidence in the car to maneuver it in a way that gives them that little bit of opportunity to really put the hammer down? So Diogo Farao in the Jacquard machine. You can see the back end of the car really starting to slip and slide. And the Racar number 65 is definitely going to be pushed to the limits here, but we know that Christian Hahn can go quicker. We know that Thiago Vivacqua can go quicker. So too Marcel Müller. So too Werner Neugebauer. A lot of pressure on this young Portuguese star. Wants to showcase to everybody that he's just as good as the regular Porsche Brazil drivers. But rather than improve, the conditions are not improving. The weather is still against the drivers. The rain is still coming down here, and we've got to go through qualifying despite this. So into the lap we go then. The first lap begins for Diogo Farao. This is such a difficult circuit to get right in the wet. I can't even begin to tell you, because this is a circuit that used to be a Formula One track. The last time it was raced in Formula One, of course, was 1996. But it's not the busiest race circuit in the world, but certainly still one of the most competitive. So in the wet conditions, this place is a bit like an icing rink. And the drivers will be finding it trickier to balance than a drunk dad at a wedding on roller skates with ice cubes strapped to the wheels. There is the proof of it. Christian Hahn struggling to get the car slowed down for turn 3. Looks like he's going to need more than one lap this time. Thiago Vivacqua has just come out onto the circuit as well for the top 10, so really tricky at the moment for these drivers. Diogo Farao, Christian Hahn, Ryan Mascarello, Werner Neugebauer, Franco Giaffoni, Alcy Feldman, Leandro Martins, Peter Ferter, Marcel Müller and Thiago Vivacqua. That's your top 10. That's how balanced it's going to be. But a really tricky race coming up for these drivers. They don't even know yet what order the top 10 is going to be. So it's definitely going to be a tricky one to try and figure out who's going to be where. And there is Christian Hahn, the favourite for pole position, just based on what he did on the first lap. Fastest of all in the first sector, Christian Hahn, a 22.6. Fastest of all in the second sector as well, 55.9, but he's run off the road there. And that's going to be exerting track limits. So this lap isn't going to be the quick one. He's going to have to do it again. 55.992 for the second sector. Look at him sliding around all over the place like a jackknifing cruise liner. Goodness me. Christian Hahn struggling to get the car dialed in, particularly in the slower apexes. That's when the back end really wants to overtake the front. But he's gone well over track limits, so I don't think this is going to count. Oh, he was flirting with the gravel on the outside line of the Parabolica. Talk about pushing the limits. He only wants to do one lap, but having gone way off the course, I think he's going to have to do another one. This one's not going to count. 1:54.7, so it's a very fast lap. But I think he's gone off the road during the lap, so he's got to do another one. Werner Neugebauer, 1:55.464. What does Ryan Mascarello do? 1:56.6. Diogo Farao's first banker lap was a 1:58.09. So still a lot of pace to come. There's Marcel Müller. And he is still on his flying lap. He's done the fastest first sector of anybody, though. 22.249. So Marcel Müller looking good this time. And just on that basis, Christian Hahn's going to need to do another lap, because Marcel Müller is clearly putting together what looks like it could be a pole. Look at the rain. It's getting really tricky now. Marcel Müller tippy-toeing on that throttle pedal. And he's gone fastest of all in the second sector, a 55.9. Well, Christian Hahn's just done a 22.4 for the first sector, so it's comparable, but it's not as quick as Marcel Müller. At least the rain is staying consistent and steady. So the track surface is as bad as it's going to be, but it's not going to get any worse by the look of it. So this is where things are obviously going to get pretty tricky. Out of the final turn. Back on the throttle. Marcel Müller's really hoping he's nailed this. He's got it perfect on the exit. That's still within track limits. No problems there. Can Marcel Müller bag the pole position? 1:54.734 to beat. And it's there. 1:54.470. 0.264 quicker than anybody else. Now here's Diogo Farao, the local star. Christian Hahn's just gone faster than anybody else in Sector 2, by the way. And Tiago Vivacqua has the fastest third sector time. So Christian Hahn just behind Diogo Farao here. He's not done. He might have a quicker lap in the tank. Farao runs very wide. I think Christian Hahn just kept it on the road behind him. So this could be a better chance for Christian Hahn. It's a cleaner lap for him. Farao comes over. Has not done better. What about... It's pole position so far for Christian Hahn. 1:54.408. He outpaces Marcel Müller by 62 thousandths of a second. That is practically nothing. Werner Neugebauer now third. Tiago Vivacqua fourth from Franco Giaffoni. Alsu Feldman, who will start 16th if he goes the way he is, because he's got that 10-place grid penalty to carry. Then we've got Ryan Mascarello now leading in the sport category ahead of Leandro Martins, Diogo Farao and Peter Ferter. 3 minutes left of the session. Still plenty of time to get these decent laps on the board, but that doesn't mean they're going to have a good race circuit to do that with. So what's Ryan Mascarello doing? First sector is a 22.87. It's comparable. Not sure whether that's going to be good enough to really put him in the top 6 overall. Certainly it's looking good for him to be the top sport driver still. And that time is pretty much identical to what he set previously. Now there is the number 8. This is one to watch. Werner Neugebauer. Last week in the dry, he teamed up with Rubens Barrichello and they won the endurance race. Oh, a big slide for Neugebauer. Well, that's ruined that lap. And he came right off the racing line. Remember what I was telling you earlier about you don't necessarily want to be running the ragged racing line on this circuit. You want to be off it because of the rubber that's gone down, and Neugebauer locks up again. That was much more evident on that lap. Oy, oy, oy. It must be so difficult to drive these cars. What did I say about them driving around like drunk dads on a wedding on roller skates with ice cubes strapped to the wheels? That was a perfect rendition of it right there from the drivers. And again, Leandro Martins is right off the racing line. You can't run on the racing line because, of course, rubber's gone down on the road. So essentially, you're skating and aquaplaning along the racetrack. Big tank slapper there from Tiago Vivacqua. But he's gone quick enough for third. He's done a 1:55.00 now. So that's quicker than Neugebauer, quicker than Giaffoni, and quicker than Alsu Feldman. So we've got 6 Carrera Cup drivers and 4 sport drivers that have made it through to this top 10 shootout. 1:25 on the clock, roughly. So this is really close in the battle for third position. Vivacqua and Giaffoni now working them at it. Giaffoni has got up to 4th place on a 1:55.15. That's quicker than Werner Neugebauer. Everybody's still out there. Nobody leaving this one to chance. As we watch Franco Giaffoni, who is actually fractionally quicker than Werner Neugebauer. And that's because he's got him to chase. So actually having the Marta number 3 car behind the Marta number 8 car, that actually works out really well in his favour because he's got somebody to chase. Therefore, he's got a reason to push because there's a guy in front of him who he knows is technically quicker as Werner Neugebauer loses everything coming off turn 3. Goodness me. What a save. Out of turn 4. Almost throws the car completely away. And that's Werner Neugebauer backing down from the lap. Well, I'm afraid to say, Werner Neugebauer is not going to be on pole position this week. He was last week, not this time. That was a huge mistake. But he manages to save the car from the wall. That's the big thing. Oh, look at the rain now. It's getting heavier. That's why they're really struggling. You're not going to see any better lap times now in the sectors. Everybody's now in the 24s, 25s. Sector 2, they're in 56s, 57s, some even in the 1 minute mark. Yeah, it's too wet. They're not going to get a better lap time now. Time runs down to 0, and you're not going to see any improvements because the weather has deteriorated again. And this could actually pose a bit of a threat to the Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying session straight after this. But pole position goes the way of Christian Hahn, a 1:54.408. A very good run indeed. Marcel Müller, second best. Tiago Vivacqua and Franco Giaffoni are 3rd and 4th from Werner Neugebauer. And then Ryan Mascarello has just outpaced Alsu Feldman. That's a little bit of an embarrassment for the Tag Heuer Porsche driver. No improvement there from Franco Giaffoni, but he stays in 4th place. Ryan Mascarello up to P6. He can be very happy indeed with that. Ahead of Alsu Feldman, who will start 17th, thanks to his 10-place grid penalty. And then Diogo Farao, Leandro Martins, and Peter Ferter. Look at the rain. It's almost impossible to drive this car around this circuit in a decent position. So that's going to make the upcoming Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying session an absolute lottery. There may even be a delay to this session because of how heavy the rain has suddenly started coming down again. Oy, oy, oy. I've been in Portugal many a time in the wet conditions, and I can tell you that when it rains here, boy does it rain. You're so close to the ocean, of course, and it can get very heavy here. The weather patterns can be quite nasty. I remember getting stranded once in the Autódromo Algarve hotel and a midweek run through COVID because of how wet it was. Thank goodness I had a couple of box sets with me, otherwise I would have had a very dull day indeed. Well, Christian Hahn getting out of the car, and a 1:54.408. Not a bad run, and a very good lap. He's happy with that, but he had to work for it. He really had to work for that one compared to last time. In the previous session, it was just one lap. That's good enough. Right, let's focus on the top 10 shootout. He had to really extract something pretty special from the car there in order to get pole position. Look at Werner Neugebauer. Slide, 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 catch the gravel, up in the air, catch the grass, somehow find the racetrack again. That is the kind of moment where you get a few more grey hairs. And that's Franco Giaffone doing very similar in the Marta number 3 car. Such a difficult race circuit this in the wet conditions. At Estoril is not the easiest race circuit in the world to tame anyway. But Christian Hahn, pole position then in the Porsche Cup C6 Bank 2024 weekend here at Estoril in Portugal. A great run from Christian Hahn ahead of Marcel Müller, Thiago Vivacqua, Franco Giaffone and Werner Neugebauer. P6 for Ryan Mascarello, the leading sports driver. The leading rookie driver is Gustavo Farah. He'll be very happy indeed with that. It was, of course, Eduardo Minossi, but he got a penalty for coming into the pit lane unsafely by traversing the white line, and so his best time was deleted. So that's it for the Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil qualifying session. We are, of course, going to stay here at the Circuito Estoril because we've got the Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying session straight after this. So they're going to continue. But Christian Hahn is posing. Pole position. Very good indeed there for the number 26 Blau Pharmaceutica driver. Christian Hahn doing a great job. Exactly what he needed. Now, there's a penalty that's been confirmed for Leandro Martins. So Leandro Martins has got a penalty, and I think it's for the same incident. I think it's for the same difficulty that befell Eduardo Minossi earlier. I think he's had to come into the pits at the very last minute, and he's crossed over the white line. So a penalty for Leandro Martins. So it's not just Alcy Feldman that's going to drop out of the top 10. It could also be Leandro Martins that drops out of the top 10. So that's very unfortunate. Well, that's obviously going to be another issue for the drivers to clean up. And now we're going to focus ourselves and our attentions again on the next challenge for the competitors, which is, of course, the Sprint Challenge of Brazil. They're going to continue having a very interesting run of it. So I hope you're enjoying the coverage of Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. We're obviously now going to move from Carrera Cup to the Sprint Challenge. And this is where things get a little bit more interesting. You get a few more spicy drivers coming in. A lot of them are not racing drivers first. They are businessmen first. But some of them are obviously hoping to plough their trade in the motor racing profession. None the least, of course, is the talented 18-year-old female racer Antonella Bassani. Very talented driver, already a Porsche champion. As the pole position trophy for Carrera Cup is given to this man, Christian Hahn. Not a bad run from him at all. Just watching the pole position sitters then. Gustavo Farah is confirmed as the rookie pole position sitter. He'll be very happy with that in the Dango Giabalo Porsche, the number 84, the silver car with the rainbow insignias. Very cool car, that. In sport, the pole position goes the way of this man, Ryan Mascarello, the man who won earlier this year in Velocità. And he didn't just win in class, he actually won overall. So a very impressive run indeed for Ryan Mascarello. He's having a great 2024 season. But the pole position in Carrera Cup goes to this man, Christian Hahn. He only needed one lap to get through to the top 10 shootout. He worked hard to get to the pole position. So he's done a very fair job indeed. And good to see Christian Hahn maximising his potential and going pole position. Right, back to the race circuit. And we can see that the drivers are venturing out onto the course to go for the next qualifying session. And this is now time for the Sprint Challenge of Brazil. So the drivers coming into this category really for the first time, getting themselves into motorsport. Some of them racing for the very first time, never mind racing in Porsche Carrera for the first time. In we go then for the challenge. Now, there are some grid penalties to hand out for the drivers in the challenge category as well, based on what we saw last week in the endurance race. Alci Feldman-Nito, he has a 10-place grid penalty, the young teenage son of Alci Feldman. And Caio Castro, he has a 5-position penalty for the grid as well. So those 2 penalties will obviously need to be applied as we come through. Now we're into the rookie category. First and foremost, the rookies venture out onto the course for the Sprint Challenge. You're going to get fewer drivers in this particular category. We had 33 in total in Carrera Cup Brazil. The Sprint Challenge is always a little bit less subscribed, but that doesn't mean the racing isn't any less interesting as we look at the number 9 car, the Latine Porsche of Claudio Reina, who had a very interesting run to the rookie victory last week in Estoril in the endurance race. They're just hearing on the broadcast in Portuguese from Ryan Mascarello, the man who got the victory at Veloster a few weeks ago and was able to mix it up with the Carrera Cup drivers. It's good to see him back on form. He actually missed last week the endurance race, so he must have had a business commitment, or maybe endurance racing is not really something he's interested in doing. There's no obligation if you're in the Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil to race in endurance and sprint. I know there are a few drivers that missed it. So we're going to return back to the action on track in the powerboat Porsche race that is currently being prepared. Look how much standing water there is on the main straight. And we're into a qualifying session. Goodness me. Looks like there's yellow flags on the course already. But the 7 drivers that are trying to get a decent lap time on the board are Claudio Reina, the man you're looking at, Claudio Chimiao, Lucas Locatelli, Caio Chaves, Vanya Pontes, also Feldman-Nito, and Eric Santos. Those are the 7 drivers gunning for it at the moment, hoping for a really strong battle and a really strong run. Going to be an interesting run for all of the contenders here as we look at Lucas Locatelli. Good to see Lucas Locatelli back in the action again. Missed him last week. It would have been nice to see the Harker Porsche, but we certainly get to see it now. And he's going to be trying his best to come up with a time that's going to be good enough to keep him in the ranks. Now, last week we didn't get many of the Sprint Challenge drivers taking part, to be fair. But now we're getting all of the contenders up to speed. Now, there is the retro livery, the number 1 car of Alci Feldman-Nito. He shares the number that his father races in the Carrera Cup. And it's his signature on the side because, of course, you're not allowed to put the name of the corporate partner this is in tribute to for tobacco-related reasons. But it is a very nice-looking Porsche in that retro-based livery. The reason they've put the colours on the car is not to do with the tobacco, of course. It's to do with the heritage of motorsport. You very much get these retro racing liveries on the cars. It's rather awkward that some of them are not really appropriate in 2024 to advertise those particular products and brands. But that's motorsport. It always evolves. It's a constantly moving goalpost. So Claudio Reina, Claudio Chimiao, Lucas Locatelli, Caio Chaves, Vanya Pontes, Alci Feldman-Nito, and Eric Santos doing their best to continue on the very tricky and very slippery road that is Estoril. And there is the 54. That is Caio Chaves in his red and white Tag Heuer Porsche. That's a new livery for the Caio Chaves car. And I have to say, it looks absolutely stunning. It's not quite the British Racing green Tag Heuer car that we're used to. But I tell you what, it does look absolutely gorgeous. The red with the white streaks of the Tag Heuer colours. And it's great to see so many of these prolific brands still backing and supporting the Porsche Carrera Cup of Brazil, even though we're on holiday here in Portugal, having a very different race of it, having a very different time of it. So Claudio Chimiao has gone across the line in the quickest time so far, a 2 minute 5.358. What can Caio Chaves do as he crosses the line? A 2:06.766. So not a bad run so far. Obviously a little bit more to do, but it's still very early days in the appalling wet conditions. It's absolutely atrocious, the conditions that the drivers are currently being presented with at the moment. Claudio Chimiao, Claudio Reina, Caio Chaves, Alci Feldman-Nito, Vanya Pontes, Lucas Locatelli, and Eric Santos is the order of proceedings at the moment. The car you're watching is the fastest man on track at this present moment. The HDI Seguros car of Claudio Shimao. So Claudio Shimao just hoping to continue this run. A 2-minute 5.358. That is not a quick lap, even in the sprint challenge. So you'll find that the lap times are going to come down quite dramatically. So interesting scenarios for the contenders at this moment in time. But Claudio Shimao has the top spot from Claudio Reina, Carlos Chavez, Alcifeld Benito, Vania Pontes, Lucas Locatelli, and Eric Santos has yet to set his competitive lap time. So it's obviously going to be very interesting to see how the drivers cope with the conditions. And I can tell you that the rain has not even really eased off based on what we saw from the previous session of the Carrera Cup drivers. So none of that has actually really been working to a tough situation. 5 minutes and 25 minutes left of the Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying session here at Estoril, live on Motorsport TV. Whoa! Claudio Reina spins the car. Well done. He actually kisses the barrier rather than slams into it full chat. He managed to get the speed scrubbed off before he nudged the barrier there. So that was a very scary moment for Claudio Reina. But fortunately, that's only a love tap with the barrier. He should be able to get that out of the barrier and get going again. In fact, I can't even see him there at turn 2 anymore. So he's clearly done that. Yeah, there he is. And there's no damage to the car that I can see. So we're sliding under braking though. So clearly still finding the car a bit of a handful. And I'm afraid Carlos Chavez has displaced him down to third because Carlos Chavez has now banged in a 2-minute 4.444. So it's all going very well. Could be very interesting to see how it's going to continue battling away. Bit of an off there, or no, a bit of a back off, I should say, really, for Claudio Shimao. He's obviously done a fast lap and has come back off the throttle. Still waiting to see what Lucas Locatelli and Vania Pontes can actually do. They've just put in banker laps for the moment. Nothing particularly competitive from either driver on this particular rank. But now we're looking to see if Claudio Reina can pick up the pieces. What was his first sector time? 24.75. It's all right, but I don't really think that's going to be spectacular enough to go for the top end. You really want to be flirting with the times that were set by Carlos Chavez, who is now fastest in sectors 1, 2, and 3. He did 23.4 for the first sector, 1 minute flat 0.2 for the middle sector, and then a 38.4 for the third sector. So you've got to be quite smooth, which is very difficult to achieve on this circuit in these cars. Very tricky indeed. Well, interestingly, Carlos Chavez has just set another new fastest first sector at 23.478. So has gone even quicker, to be fair. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it continues on in a decent progress at the moment. Carlos Chavez, you can't see his car at the moment, but he's behind these guys at the moment. What's he done for the first sector? Oh, 1 minute 1.24. So he's lost about a second on this particular fastest lap. But again, this is just a lottery now. This is about who can get the most out of the car at different times. Lucas Locatelli's gone P4 though, a 2 minute 6.238. Ay. Look at the standing water now on the main straight. It's about as wet as it's been all day. So it's not drying up, it's getting wetter. So very tricky indeed here. Carlos Chavez currently leading in the rookies category of the Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying for the C6 Bank Estoril round. Carlos Chavez ahead of Claudio Shimao, Claudio Reina, Lucas Locatelli, Alcifeld Benito 5th, and then Eric Santos in front of Vania Pontes. Up to second comes Alcifeld Benito though, a 2 minute 3.909. So a very good run indeed from Alcifeld Benito. That's going to update on the timing screen very soon. Oh, a spin from Claudio Reina again. So Claudio Reina's had another off and he's spun it around, but I think he's managed to get the car moving again because what was a yellow flag has now gone to a green flag again. So Claudio Reina spinning off at almost exactly the same place he kissed the barrier a short while ago. So another spin from Claudio Reina in appalling conditions here at Estoril. So Carlos Chavez having an interesting time of it as he continues to top the place. Oh, really got the braking wrong for that one. So he was trying to be a bit too aggressive on the racing line there and he just rolled off the brake a little bit too gingerly. And as a result, he had to carry the throttle a little bit further through the apex of the corner, and that almost spat him into the gravel trap. But the weather being so horrendous here at the moment, it's very difficult to find any form of grip around the course at all. So really tricky for all of the drivers to find any form of traction at all at this point. Not easy, and that is for sure. So Carlos Chavez is currently on provisional pole as the rookie leader. Alcio Feldman-Nito second from Claudio Shimao. Claudio Reina, who has got the car going again after his second spin. Lucas Locatelli, Eric Santos, and Rainier Pontes. So they've all had their moments in this session, and obviously you're going to see a little bit more Flotsam and Jetsam in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil than you would in Carrera Cup Brazil, because these guys have a lot less experience to play with. And of course, last week we had a very interesting partnership in the endurance race in this category, because Antonella Bassani, who you're going to see in a short while in the challenge category, was actually teamed up with the Red Bull athlete Letizia Buffoni, who this weekend has gone back to Ventura and the X Games, because she's actually not as well known as a racing driver as she is as an X Games skateboarding champion. She's actually back in Ventura this weekend, gunning for her 13th X Games medal as a skateboarder, which would be a new world record. So we look forward to the Red Bull athlete doing a great job. Good luck, Letizia. Hopefully you're going to get a little bit of history made this weekend. And I'm sure, knowing how passionate she is about these Porsches, that she's going to be watching along and hoping that her teammate from last week, Antonella Bassani, gets a pole position. She's done it before. She can do it again. Carlos Chavez, Lucas Locatelli now up to second. Interesting. There is Carlos Chavez, the man on pole position. So Carlos Chavez in the gorgeous red and white Tag Heuer Porsche, number 54. Looking very treacherous, the conditions now. Time has run down to 0, so now it's literally just a race back to the pits to see if anybody can make the most of this final flying lap. Rainier Pontes is not going to improve. He stays P6 as he crosses the line to finish his laps. What about Claudio Shimao and Claudio Reina? Are they going to be able to get anything together in the closing stages here? Certainly for Carlos Chavez, it looks pretty neat and tidy. 2 minutes 2.5. That shows you just how slow the circuit is compared to what it was in the Carrera Cup qualifying just a short while ago, because the weather conditions are just absolutely appalling. I mean, they were bad before, but they're horrendous now. Absolutely awful now. So there is Carlos Chavez. Oh, almost chucked it into the chicken house at the final corner there. Goodness me. Carlos Chavez, the fastest man in the rookie category. I think I'd bring it into the pits if I were you. You know the lap isn't going to be quicker. He's going to commit to it. Okay, fair enough, Carl. I don't think this is going to be a quicker lap somehow. He crosses the finish line, and it's not. A 2 minute 2.968 is what he does on the last one. Oh, no, sorry, it's a 2 minute 1.831 is what he does. So, yeah, I would have bailed out on that, to be perfectly honest. Once you've had a tank snapper like that in the penultimate corner, you know the lap's not going to be quicker, but he wanted to finish the lap anyway. Lucas Locatelli. You've got to remember that with these Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil drivers, a lot of these guys are still at the stage when they're working out little idiosyncrasies like that. Well, I haven't gone quicker, so I may as well pit. I may as well save the tyres a bit. Some of them just want to get to the end of the session, and regardless. And Lucas Locatelli. Oh, what a brilliant final lap. 2 minute 1.575. Completely out of left field. He snatches the pole position away as Alcio Feldman-Nito held it briefly. He had a 2 minute 2.252. Very nearly all the twos there from Alcio Feldman-Nito. But I'm afraid it's P2, because this man, Lucas Locatelli, has snatched the pole position away from Carlos Chavez. That's how important it was for Carlos Chavez to get that tidy lap finished up. And I'm afraid he's lost out by a second to Lucas Locatelli, who bangs in pole position in rookie in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil qualifying session here at Seguimos Estoril, powered by C6 Bank. This is Lucas Locatelli. Oh! Even on the pole lap, he almost threw it away. Fair play to the Harker Porsche driver. Very nicely dealt with. 2 minute 1.575. None of the rookie drivers able to lap this circuit in less than 2 minutes. A fantastic situation. Really, really tricky out there on the course as we study the number 21 car getting ready to go out. That's Miguel Mariotti. He's going to be a favourite for the sport pole, that's for sure. So let's see what he can do when he comes out onto the circuit very shortly indeed. We've got just 3 sessions left from the Porsche Cup C6 Bank of Brazil. We've had the Sprint Challenge qualifying in the rookie category. Now we'll get the sport category. Then after that, we'll get the challenge category. And then the top 10 will go for their shootout. And that will be a wrap. Great to see all of the distinguished guests here at Porsche. It's always part of the lifestyle, of course, in Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. You're not just here for great racing. You're here for good fun and games. You're here to wax lyrical and swap war stories with your fellow racers, your fellow tycoons and businessmen and entrepreneurs who love to go motor racing and love to spend their money on something worthwhile. Who needs a yacht in the Bahamas when you can be a racing driver, eh? Into the pits comes Eric Santos. Not quite the lap time he was hoping for from the RX Racing Porsche. There's Miguel Castro getting himself ready. Miguel Caetano, I should say, getting himself ready. Now, he's carrying 10 kilos of ballast into this weekend based on his prior performances in the championship. So that will actually help him a little bit in the wet conditions, because you want a bit more downforce. You want a bit more stability and traction in the wet. So anybody that's got a weight ballast to carry into this weekend is probably actually sitting fairly well. Here's Caio Castro. He has got a 5-place grid penalty to take into this weekend, but he's also got a 35-kilogram weight ballast to carry in. Now, if I were you, Caio, I would give your mobile phone to somebody before you go racing. He's just there, sat in the cockpit of the car. Sat in the cockpit of the car at this moment in time. Oh, he's on Instagram. He's doing an Instagram live at the moment. Well done, Caio Castro. It's never a bad moment to keep up to date with your fans. Literally seconds before he's going out for qualifying. Well, you wouldn't see Carlos Sainz doing that, would you? Fair play to Caio Castro, keeping up to date with his fans seconds before he heads out onto the circuit for time qualifying. Fair play. Keep the fans abreast of the situation. Right, Caio, you're going to need to give your phone to somebody. You can't go out on the grid with that. I seem to recall a Formula 2 or a Formula 3 driver years ago. I think it might have been Santino Ferrucci. He drove around with a mobile phone in his hand and had the rule book thrown at him rather acutely. So before you head out onto the track, Caio, for goodness sake, give your iPhone to one of your mechanics. Oh, that could be very nasty. Right, out onto the circuit then go the challenge drivers. Oh, actually, no, I think he's got a few minutes. I think he's got a few minutes, to be fair, because we've got the sport drivers out on the circuit, which are denoted by a yellow number plate. And Caio Castro has a red number plate, so he's going to be in the challenge a little bit later. So he's in car, suited and helmeted up, still with about 10 minutes to go, and he's talking to his fans on Instagram. Good for him. Good lad. So we've got the sport drivers in challenge out on the circuit. There's the 100% Porsche. That's the car being driven by Seba Malucelli. We've also got Celio Brasil, this man, Giuliano Bertuccelli. We also have Luis Souza, Matthias Roque, Leonardo Herman, Miguel Caetano, and Sangho Kim. So Miguel Caetano just getting himself up to speed in this rather nice Veloso Motorsport Porsche and trying his best to extract the most out of it. Very difficult to see where everybody's going to make the best of it. Lucas Locatelli being interviewed by our local reporters in fluent Portuguese, of course. So if you want the reaction, you'll have to head to the website, which of course is Porsche GT3 Cup.com.br. And you can get a translation in English, I do believe. So you should be able to get all of that. Fascinating situation for all of the contenders. But Celio Brasil, Giuliano Bertuccelli, Seba Malucelli, Luis Souza, Matthias Roque, Leonardo Herman, Miguel Caetano, and Kim Sang-ho are all going to be looking to find that exceptional pace that's going to carry them ahead of the rookies. And there's only 8 drivers in the sport category. I did say that there's fewer drivers in Sprint Challenge than there is in Carrera Cup. 33 drivers in total in Carrera Cup. You're only going to get about 22, maybe 23 drivers in Sprint Challenge altogether. So the drivers trying to find their feet. The rain has not stopped. It's not eased up either. So it's still just a nightmare for these drivers to try and find a decent qualifying lap. It is a bit of a lottery as we look at the Portuguese local, Miguel Caetano, getting himself up to speed and hoping for a home pole position. He certainly knows the track better than the Brazilian drivers do. They may speak the same language, sort of. I mean, if you tell a Brazilian and a Portuguese driver, do you speak the same language? They'll say, well, yes, vaguely. But then there is Portuguese and there's Brazilian Portuguese. Two slightly different dialects, of course. So they can... Oh, someone's gone off. Someone's gone straight off at turn 3. Now, who is that that's binned it on what is essentially the first flying lap? That's the Coppert Porsche. So that is Leonardo Herrmann. That's one of the big contenders for pole position in sport. And Leonardo Herrmann has dropped it off turn 3 and gone clean into the barriers. Now, he's going to be beached there, I think, in the gravel. So this could be a red flag. Let's have a look. Just too early on the throttle. It was looking good, but then he just got a little bit too much, and he can't stop that. Bang! And he's beached in the gravel. He's never getting that car out of there. Ugh. Well, I'm afraid that could be a red flag, and I think it is. Yep, red flags. That was pretty inevitable. 7 minutes 58 on the clock, so there's still going to be plenty of time for the challenge drivers to put a lap time in, but certainly a lot less time than they would have hoped for because nobody's able to complete a flying lap. And to be fair, Leonardo Herrmann did not need that after the embarrassment of last week when the car just wasn't responding, he wasn't getting the most out of it, and he actually dropped it in the middle of the endurance race a couple of times. He needed a race weekend that was a bit more salvational. He needed something to really put the lead back in the pencil to a certain degree. But I'm afraid that's not going to be the case here. Leonardo Herrmann drops it, and it's really unfortunate because there's not really a lot he can do about it. He's not going to get any time to get a time on the grid, so he's going to be dead last. So now everybody else will make their way back to the pits, ready for instruction. I'd say that's going to take about 4 to 5 minutes to clear because it's in a weird position as well. It's on the exit of turn 3. It's beached in the gravel at the most bizarre angle. So it's going to be a crane extraction. It's not just going to be a simple tow. There is a crane operative down there, I do believe, so it shouldn't take a massive amount of time, but that's going to be at least 4 or 5 minutes under red flag conditions. And in this weather, you don't want that. Of course, for the fans of Caio Castro, it means they get to have 4 to 5 minutes more conversation on Instagram live with him, but that's not really the point, is it? I'm watching Cherio Brasil in the Solides Porsche. Again, fascinating to watch the different drivers' interpretations of this slow chicane. Nobody really going anywhere near those curbs. It's a bit like those old video games when you were trying to beat the boss and you don't want to get too near to them because otherwise they will just punch you straight off the wall. And that's what these curbs will do to these drivers. If you run the gauntlet and run over them in the wet conditions, you're going straight off the road, which is why you give them a wide berth in the wet conditions. You don't ride them. Cherio Brasil in the Metropax Solides Porsche number 139. And there is the 7. That's Luis Souza, who had a very adventurous week last week in the endurance battle. Very, very tricky. So we're going to have to see how things continue to progress. There's the 32 car. That's the TPM audio visual car. That's the one driven by Matthias Roque in the bright pink machine. You can legitimately call a Porsche that is pink a pink pig, because of course that was the nickname they used to run as in the 1980s at Le Mans when they had that gorgeous lime pink machine. And everybody referred to it as the Pink Pig, which was a rather unflattering nickname. But ever since then, if you ever see a pink Porsche, you can refer to it as a pink pig. There's Miguel Caetano, local star. And you can tell he's local because on the door frame, here's the Portuguese flag. See, normally you would see that in Porsche Carrera Cup, in the Super Cup, the Porsche Super Cup. It's kind of an international thing that they run in. But here in Porsche Brazil, there's no need to put the Brazilian flag on the door frame because pretty much everybody is. So when there's 1 or 2 exceptions, aka Miguel Caetano, they do put the Portuguese flag on the door frame. We just saw Kim Sang-ho. Now we're going to see Miguel Caetano. And everybody is sat at the foot of pit lane, ready to go. After the red flag that was triggered there by Leonardo Herrmann. I'm actually surprised we haven't had more red flags. We've only had 1. And I'm surprised that we've had as little as 1 red flag in the conditions here in Estoril. It is absolutely atrocious, the weather conditions here. It's a bit like swimming around this racetrack at the moment. So the contenders are doing their best to see out the windscreen They're doing their best to keep the cars on the road, on board, as you can see with Miguel Gaetano of the Veloso team. And it's an interesting one for him, really, because he's not really been able to get much out of last week. He had a reasonable run, but I don't think he really showed us what he was made of. Right, we can go racing again then. We can go into qualifying again, I should say, because Leonardo Herrmann's car has been cleared very quickly. We haven't seen the clean-up operation, but we wouldn't be going green unless it was already done. So that was actually a quicker clean-up than I thought we were going to get. So that's obviously very positive news. So we're getting straight back into qualifying then. And it's this group of 7 drivers now, not 8, because Leonardo Herrmann is going to take no further part in qualifying after being the driver that binned it off the circuit. Very unfortunate. So we've got Celio Brasil, Giuliano Bertuccelli, Seba Malucelli, Luis Souza, Matthias Roque, Miguel Gaetano, and Kim Sang-ho are all going to be going now for the pole position in the Porsche Cup C6 Bag Sprint Challenge here at Estoril, round 4. So we're in the Challenge Sport category. Leonardo Herrmann's car, I think, has actually been brought back to pit lane. I don't know if he's actually managed to get the car pushed out by the marshals and then he's driven it back to the pits, because we didn't see any crane extraction. Wide berth, stay off those curbs. Even on the warming up lap, you want to stay off those curbs, because honestly, it's like those video games when you end up on you know, I don't know if any of you have ever played the rather childish video game Fall Guys, but when you're on ice, you basically just slide all the way through, and that's what the curbs react in a similar way to. And there you are. I've just shown my age and my maturity. I can't believe I've brought up the video game Fall Guys in a professional motorsport commentary. Oh dear. All the guys and girls down in Dubai at Yavan David HQ would be very proud of me, I'm sure. So Celio Brasil, Giuliano Bertuccelli, Seba Malucelli, Luis Souza, Matthias Roque, Miguel Gaetano, and this man. No, sorry, we were looking briefly there at Kim Sang-ho, but now we're looking at the man we're on board with. You've got a 2-camera view shot here. You've got Miguel Gaetano on board, and you've also got him working his way through on the external shot. So this is the local favourite, Miguel Gaetano, hoping that he can do pretty much a similar job to what we saw from Diogo Forau a little earlier on in the Carrera Cup qualifying session. He wants to be the local star with local knowledge to get a decent lap time on the board. But obviously they've got less time to get a decent time on the board now, because the red flag has essentially deleted 5 minutes of the qualifying session. And that's definitely going to make things a little bit trickier. 5 minutes and 15 left of the session then. Lucas Locatelli, currently the fastest driver from the rookie category, 2 minutes 1.575. Expect the drivers here to be flirting with 2 minutes flat for the lap, because obviously the sport drivers are a little bit more experienced than the rookie drivers are. They might have a little bit more confidence in the circuit, but if more rain has gone down, then it'll be pretty much a stalemate. It could be a very interesting top 10 here, because we still haven't had the challenge drivers yet. And I tell you what my prediction is for the challenge. I've got a feeling Antonella Bassani is going to get pole position this time, because the 18-year-old furious female, fantastic race driver, was the challenge champion last year, don't forget. But she comes into this weekend off the back of a horrendous weekend last week in the endurance, where she shared the car with her colleague Letizia Buffoni, the X Games athlete for Red Bull. 12 times a gold medalist in X Games. 12 times a medalist, I should say. I think she's won about 3 or 4 gold medals in the X Games as a Red Bull athlete in the skateboarding category. Letizia Buffoni, great driver as well. But last week in the endurance race, they had an awful time because there were no end of engine problems. They actually changed cars twice through the course of the endurance race last week. It was such a bad time of it, as they started in their original race car in qualifying. Then on the grid, they realized they had an engine misfire. They swapped to they swapped to a spare car. Then they found that the engine was working again in the normal race car, so they swapped back at the pit stops, which you're allowed to do in endurance racing in Porsche Carrera Cup. As long as you're in a Porsche Carrera, it doesn't matter which one you're in. They can change the transponders over quite quickly and change the numbers of the car quite quickly as well. Just change the plates. And then they got back into their normal race car, and I think it lasted half a stint, and then they had to come back in again and change back to the old one. And Antonella Bassani essentially gave the car over to Letizia Buffoni, way out of competition. Very unfortunate. Not a lot they could do about it. So I'm hoping that she's going to be fired up and motivated to go for a pole position, or certainly a race victory here this weekend, and she's got every chance to do so. She won earlier this year at Velocita, very talented driver, of course, and the reigning Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil champion. You'll see her out later. For the moment, we've got this man, Luis Souza, trying to get himself up into the top 10. Has he done it on this particular lap? Let's have a look. Well, he's got up to 12th with his first banker lap. That's a 2 minute 11.75. You'll go a lot quicker than that. They will go a lot quicker than that, even in the wet conditions here. They're going to find a little bit more out of the car. So there's a lot more still to do, a lot more still to find in the machinery. There is the 100% car. That's Seba Malucelli. 100% and number 100. Very fitting. Currently, Seba Malucelli is the second quickest of the sport drivers, just in behind Celio Brasil. But 2 minutes 5.9 is definitely beatable. And he's going about that right now. Fastest first sector for him is a 24.93. He's on the second sector. 1 minute 0.776 is what he's done for the second sector. So he's definitely looking very strong at the moment. But they really need to be flirting with 2 minute 1s, 2 minute 2s. That's where they're going to get some really fast times out of it. Still, Caio Chavez and Alcio Feldman-Nito have the fastest sector times, which is interesting because neither of them are the fastest driver in rookie. Lucas Locatelli was the fastest driver, and he wasn't the fastest in any of the sectors, but bringing the whole lap together, he got it pretty much spot on perfect. So very nicely done. Here is the 100% car, Seba Malucelli. Red flags again! Red flags again! So somebody else has gone off big time now. Now what's happened? Because we're red flags one more time with 1 minute 36 on the clock. So nobody's going to get another lap in. So what's happened? Here's a replay. Ooh, that's Luis Souza losing it big time in Sector 2. Planted it in the gravel. And again, once you're in the gravel trap at Estoril, you ain't coming out easily. He just carried so much speed. And there's so much standing water. The car was never going to come through. So that has ruined qualifying for all of the sport drivers. Because they're not going to get another lap time in. Because we've got 1 minute and 36 seconds left. And that's not enough time to get out onto the course and start another qualifying lap when we restart. And frustratingly, the red flags have come out and Luis Souza has actually got himself out. So that's even more frustrating. Because if he was parked there and they had to recover him, then that would be one thing. Now they're going to add 5 minutes to the timer. That's interesting. They've added 5 minutes to the time. I've literally just seen them go from 1 minute 36 seconds to go to 6 minutes 36 seconds to go. So we are going to overrun on time here. But at least that means that the drivers are actually going to get some proper running in. So that's how that works out. So we're under red flags for the second time in this group. Never mind in this qualifying session. Because we had a spin for Leonardo Herrmann. He's out of it. Luis Souza spun the car, the red flags came out, and then he was able to drive himself out of the gravel trap. So now they are going to get another chance. But I'm afraid to say that this is a rather stop-start qualifying session for those of you who are hoping for a swift solution. Now this is Seba Malucelli. Now he has run the gauntlet of the curbs, as has Miguel Gaetano. Are the grip conditions improving in Sector 3, I wonder? Because they are now starting, look, to use the curbs. Because normally in these weather conditions, you wouldn't go near them. You wouldn't risk it. Well, here we go. We're back to green flags again. A nice fast turnaround thanks to Luis Souza driving himself back onto the racetrack. But please, guys, please, let's just have 6 minutes of green flag running where you can get your fast times in. I tell you, Caio Castro's fan base are loving this. Because he's still online with them, I'm sure. That's funny. I'm going to try and see if I can go back and watch that live stream a little later. I won't understand a word of it, of course, because it's in fluent Portuguese, and I'm afraid my Portuguese is very minimal. I can pretty much order one of those beautiful cupcakes, one of those beautiful angel tarts in Portuguese, and that's about it. What are they? The pastel de natas. That's about it. That's all my Portuguese. I could probably order a soup from the McDonald's that they do in Portugal. Yes, indeed. Who would have thought you could actually get soup in a McDonald's in Portugal? That shows you how long it's been in between red flags, and you know I'm running out of meaningful data to talk about until these guys are back on their green flag laps. So these guys are just pounding around again, trying to get the tyres and the brakes back up to temperature. But this stop-start nature of things doesn't help, because essentially you're warming the tyres up and then you're cooling them and then you're warming them and then you're cooling them. They're not going to give you the best that they are able to do, even in these conditions. So there's a good chance here that Lucas Locatelli's time is not actually going to be beaten. There is Cherio Brasil, the fastest man so far in the sport category. But he could really do with a better time than this. He's currently on a 2-minute 4.77. That's 3.2 seconds slower than the rookie's best time from Lucas Locatelli. The trouble is, these guys have not been able to get the cars up to speed. Cherio Brasil trying to do just that, really pushing it in the third sector. The thing is, you need 1 lap to get the car warmed up. You need another lap to dial the car in. And then you go for your push lap. So you have to have 3 laps, really, in these cars on wet conditions like this to really get the most out of them. So there is the number 44. That is Giuliano Bertuccelli in the Giants Porsche. Hoping for a little bit more for the... Oh, the spray is diabolical. They're really going to struggle if the weather stays like this going into racing later. You can barely see the cars down the straight. That mist has got worse. So that's a real problem going into the races later. They're going to need the fog and the mist to clear a little bit more. I can recall last week commentating on a race for Super Formula in Japan, where that was the biggest problem. It was raining, of course, at Sugo, but the biggest issue we had was visibility, because the fog and the mist was so thick we couldn't actually see the run to turn 1. And so the race did not go the full distance in the end, because there were 2 incidents. Half points were awarded. But at least with the Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil, it's not quite on the same. It's not quite on the same run as Formula One, of course. They're not quite so priorities, mind you. We are going to be having a round alongside Formula One this year, because Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil is actually going to be a support race to the Brazilian Grand Prix, or should I say the Sao Paulo Grand Prix later this year in Formula One. So we will be a guests of Formula One later this year. So it's quite an important championship for those who want to see good support race action in F1, because these guys will actually be supporting the Sao Paulo Grand Prix later this year in the autumn. So these guys get their moment of fame and fortune on the same audience bill as Formula One later this year. So currently Giuliano Bertuccelli having a chat. Our man in the pits is just trying to report the difficulties with the weather conditions. You can see the difficulties in the weather conditions for yourself out there if you're watching along on the stream, because it is pretty diabolical conditions at the moment. But everybody's just trying to keep it together to finish off the session on a high note. 2 minutes 15 left of this session. Looks like everybody's pretty much dialed things in now, so they now need to make good use of these laps. Now we're getting somewhere. Cherio Brasil just does a 2-minute 2.58 as he comes across the line. So that's a bit more like it. That's what he needs, really, to start flirting with the top spot. Seba Malucelli, he's come across the line and done a 2-minute 4.468. And Giuliano Bertuccelli, he did a 2:06.1. So they're making good progress. But they obviously need to find a lot more time than that. And that's what this lap, the one they're currently on, is for. Matthias Roque. Oh, we've got another off. It's Sang-Ho Kim. I think that's Sang-Ho Kim going off the road. Or is that Miguel Caetano, actually? So Caetano, for goodness sake, drive out of the gravel trap. I don't want another red flag, and neither do you. Now, it did seem as though Caetano was moving. So hopefully this isn't going to be another red flag. Oh, no, it's Sang-Ho Kim. It's not Miguel Caetano. And there you go. His car is beached. Ugh. How frustrating. Oh, and another off at turn 1. Oh, and that's a big shunt. That's a big shunt. That's hit the wall first. Luis Souza. Bits of Porsche everywhere. Oh, my goodness. That's a big impact. So he's got on the brakes. Oh, and the car is listed in the worst possible way. Oh dear. That is a monstrous accident for Luis Souza. Ooh. I think he'll be in a spare Porsche for the race itself. He's got on the brakes, and the brakes have just locked up, aquaplaned, and spit him off the road. Ay, 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 that is awful. Well, the Porsche is in bits. Marshall runs to the scene. Full credit to the Orange Army. We can't go racing without them, of course. And Sang-Ho Kim has beached his car. Even without the shunt for Luis Souza, we would have been red flag anyway, because Sang-Ho Kim has spun off the road, got into the gravel, tried to recover it, and got the Porsche beached. So there's no way we could have carried on qualifying anyway. But Luis Souza ending it, I think that's it. I don't think we're going to get any more from the sport category. And we're going to get a big cleanup job at turn 1 now. On the approach to turn 1, there is carbon fibre everywhere. That's a very nasty incident indeed for Luis Souza. So hopefully that's going to be a relatively swift cleanup job before the before the challenge drivers come out onto the course. But I do feel for Luis Souza, that was a very monstrous accident. And that was at the fastest point on the course as well. That was full speed, hit the brakes. The car just got out from underneath him and went clean into the barriers. There is Luis Souza getting out of the car, thank goodness. You do skip a beat a little bit. You do sort of run the gauntlet. You don't know if the driver's okay. But Luis Souza gets out of the car. Thank goodness for that. I mean, that was a very nasty impact into the first corner barrier. And I really didn't want the worst to be the scenario we were dealing with, and it's not. So thank goodness for that. Luis Souza is okay. And we can at least focus now on the practicalities of getting the rest of the race qualifying session run. Now, we've got 54 seconds left on the timer. When there was 1:36 left, we added 5 minutes, but now we've had another accident. If I'm the race director at this point, my instinct is to go, we're not restarting this. They've got some lap times in. Not all of them have, of course. But unfortunately, we can't just keep waiting around. We've got a schedule to keep up with. We've had red flags 3 times now in this group. Never mind in this qualifying session. In this group alone, we've had 3 red flags. So we can't really wait for these guys anymore. Cherio Brazil is reasonably happy. Has he done enough to make it into the top 10? He's 3rd overall at the moment. So the first 2 cars are actually rookies. Lucas Locatelli on a 2-minute 1:5.75 and Alcifel Manito on a 2:02.252. So we've got 2 rookies in the top 2 positions. In fact, we've got 4 rookies in the top 5. So now we're getting ourselves ready for the challenge drivers, the premier category, if you will, where we're going to see the likes of Caio Castro, Miguel Mariotti, and the very talented 18-year-old reigning champion, the lady driver Antonella Bassani. But for the drivers in sport, they're not going to get any more running in this qualifying session. There is Caio Castro in the Cunha Golf colours. But yeah, the times have been deleted now from the timing screen. The 54 seconds remaining. The session will not restart for Challenge Sport. So Celio Brazil is 3rd. Seba Malucelli is 6th. Giuliano Bertichelli and Matthias Roque are 8th and 9th. And then the bottom 4 are all sport drivers. Kim Sang-ho, Luis Souza, Miguel Gaetano and Leonardo Herman, who of course didn't set a lap because he was the first one to bring out the red flags. So Caio Chavez going through the chicanes. There's Vanya Pontes doing so in the D4U immigration car. Interesting to see how different drivers negotiate those chicanes. But with the race, with the qualifying session, being red flagged a 3rd time in this one group. You know, every other group has gone through from the green light at the end of the pit lane through to the checkered flag. This group alone, the sport drivers, we had 3 red flags. The first one for Leonardo Herman, the second one for Luis Souza, and then the third one for Sang-Ho Kim and Luis Souza, both going off at the same time. Luis Souza fortunately out of the car, but his car is completely destroyed. I have a feeling he'll be in one of the spares for the race itself later on this afternoon. Bitter, bitter disappointment for all of the drivers in sport, because I don't think any of them really extracted the most out of their cars. But now we've got rookies, 4 rookies in the top 5 overall, going into the Challenge Cup. Caio Chavez, currently 4th overall, 3rd in the category. It's not unusual for rookies to be in amongst the main category, but it's certainly a pleasant surprise for Lucas Locatelli to find himself still on pole position and looking good to go through to the top 10 shootout. But it's pretty tricky at the moment as we get ourselves ready for the challenge. And we're going to see some fantastic competitors in the Challenge Cup. There is Antonella Bassani in the black and gold Mobile 1 car. It's finally repaired and back up to its normal race credentials. Hopefully it's going to be enough to convert to a pole position this time. Could be a fascinating challenge for her because there's so many other drivers to go up against in the hunt for pole position. I wonder if Caio Castro's put his mobile phone away now. He's come off Instagram. There is Sadek Leiter. He's going to be one of the drivers going for pole position in the Sprint Challenge Cup. In the roll-on 68 car, 66 car even. Can't even count, Jake. What are you on about? And there is Caio Castro. He got out of the car. He's given his mobile phone to his mechanic. Look, they're still on Instagram Live, I notice. But he's given his mobile phone to his mechanic so he can take over. Whatever works, guys. Whatever works. Love it. And I love the tribute that's on the top of the sunroof there of Caio Castro as well. They're carrying it all season long. Senna, 30 years. Of course, it was 30 years ago that we rather sadly lost the late great Ayrton Senna da Silva. Arguably, and it is a very convincing argument, the greatest racing driver we've ever seen. A lot of people hold that belief, not just in Brazil, but further wide as well. I'd say he's in the top 3 personally. It's very hard to look away from Jim Clark, in my personal opinion. But Ayrton Senna would definitely be in the top 3 of all time for me. And obviously, if you're Brazilian, then Senna is the greatest of all time. That's just the way that now that's not ideal, Sang-ho. He's got out of the car, but he's forgotten to disconnect his radio line. So he did the whole Tom and Jerry cartoon yank. Bleak. That didn't really... that's not the most graceful way to exit a race car, was it, Sang-ho? And unfortunately, I've just reflected on it to make it even worse. Sorry, buddy. So the drivers now lining up at the end of pit lane to go out for the penultimate qualifying session of this Estoril round. There's Geração Campos, somewhere in there, getting himself ready. As the drivers are bearing down to prepare. It's good to see a couple of returning drivers in the Challenge Cup this time. As we focus in again on the reigning champion, Antonella Bassani, 18 years of age, a very talented female racer. I've got my money on her to race in Le Mans one of these days, most likely in the GT category. Certainly building up her credence with every race weekend that she does. Sadek Leiter getting himself ready for the qualifying challenge that's ahead of him. And this will be on the back of all the drivers' minds in challenge as well. The fact that we've just had 3 red flags in one group. That tells the driver a lot about the conditions out on the course. They're treacherous, they're almost impossible to navigate. So it's going to be a tricky one. Miguel Mariotti getting ready for this session. As to, there again, Antonella Bassani. What I love about this team as well, this crew, is it's not just Antonella Bassani, the driver, who is of the female persuasion. Most of the crew that she's got around her are women as well. A lot of the engineers, the sort of the strategists, the tyre pressure engineers, everybody. It's very nearly an all-girl crew that she has with her. There's only a couple of men within that particular team by the look of it. But certainly this is an all-girl operation on the whole. And the fact that they won the championship last year, anybody who thinks that girls can't hack this, there's the door. Don't let it bite you in the butt on the way out. There's Christian Moore, car number 3. Ready in pit lane, ready to go. He's a contender for pole position, to be fair, actually. It should be really interesting to see what he can get out of this. Could be a real challenge for Christian Moore. And, of course, Geração Campos in the Accelerado Porsche. Just a last-minute tweak to the setup, and then he can go into the action. And, of course, so too will both Sadek Leiter and Caio Castro. They weren't competing in the Challenge Cup last week in the Endurance because those 2 drivers ended up basically, well, Caio Castro certainly ended up teaming up with one of the professional Carrera Cup drivers to get a little bit of extra experience. So there weren't quite so many challenge drivers last week. There certainly are again now. The fans in the stands hoping that the race this afternoon is going to be a little bit more fluid and to schedule. Hopefully we're not going to have too many more interruptions over the course of the day. But certainly with the weather conditions being as bad as they are, it doesn't bode well, does it? As we have a quick gawk in the cockpit for Miguel Mariotti. You'll notice the stickers of Mobile 1 all over every car. And of course there is the Mobile 1 car of Antonella Bassani. 50 years of Mobile 1 being celebrated this year. Seba Marukeli, having had a reasonable run, second fastest of the sport drivers, 6th overall. And the two flags up on the top of the gantry there, the Brazilian flag and the Portuguese flag, based on the Portuguese holiday that we're currently having here at Estoril. It's been a very good run so far for everybody as we continue in fine style. The Circuito Estoril providing us with a very interesting backdrop, a very different challenge to what we're used to in the Porsche Sprint Challenge of Brazil, powered by C6 Bank. We have just 2 sessions left to run on the course. But as you can imagine, we are a slight delay now because the previous group was under red flags and we've got bits of Luis Souza's car strewn all over the first corner. So we obviously have to wait for the track to be cleared by the fantastic marshals here, the Orange Army, doing a fantastic job wherever we go around the world. You can't race in motorsport at all without the marshals. Without them, we are nothing. So we are incredibly grateful to them for all their hard work and ingenuity. And they give of their time freely and purely because of the passion and love of the sport to ensure that we can be safe and sound and go racing adequately. So Antonella Bassani getting herself ready. If Leticia Buffoni is watching from Ventura, that's your teammate last week. She's sure to do a good job. There we go. What a fantastic job from the marshals to clear their circuit of all that carbon fibre so quickly. I'm actually stunned that it was that quick a job. But well done to the marshals. We go green flags at the end of the pit lane, and the senior category of the Sprint Challenge, the challenge cars, venture out onto the circuit for their 13 minutes session. And so we are going to battle away for the pole position. And then, of course, we've got the 10 minutes top 10 shootout after that to see who's going to be in pole position. So we've got Miguel Mariotti, Antonella Bassani, Andre Rosario, Christian Moore, Caio Castro, Gerson Campos. We should have Sadek Leiter out as well. And I think that's all of them. I think we only got 7 competitors in the Sprint Challenge category, which is going to make a grand total of 22 cars on the starting grid. So there is the way it stands at the moment. Lucas Locatelli still overall pole position at the moment. But of course, we've got the top 10 shootout, so his lap should be enough, in my opinion, to get through to the top 10 shootout. Well, it's clearly going to be guaranteed that we'll have Locatelli, Alcifeld Manito, and Chelio Brasil, because it's the top 10 that go through. And we've got 7 drivers in challenge this weekend, I do believe. Or is it 8? Look at the rain. That is absolutely appalling conditions for all of the drivers. I think it's actually got worse. So the drivers are just having to warm up the tyres and brakes to the best temperature they can and have a little bit of confidence and a little bit of faith in the car, in that it's going to point them in the right direction all the way through. There is Miguel Mariotti in the Grand 7 Porsche, hoping that this car is going to go the distance and remain planted on the course for the entirety of. It's not easy to tell. We obviously had 3 red flag periods in the previous group, the Sport Challenge. But now that we're in the Challenge Cup itself, hopefully these guys should be able to keep it on the road. But it's not easy. This is a Porsche Carrera Cup car, not the easiest car to maneuver in the first place. Then they're on a circuit which is still fairly new to these drivers, very unfamiliar, the Estoril circuit. We're not in Brazil as we usually are, of course. We're in Portugal. So although we speak the same language, the race circuit is not one that the drivers are used to. So they're still learning on the job. Miguel Mariotti, the first one to start the flying lap then, with Antonella Bassani, Andre Rosario, Christian Moore, Caio Castro, Gerson Campos and Sadek Leiter, all hoping to get the top spot. There's Antonella Bassani in the gold and black Mobile 1 car. Great to see her colours back prominent once again after she had to use a spare car for the majority of the endurance race last time out. But the 18-year-old driver, Antonella Bassani, she is a very, very talented and capable pilot. Reigning champion, of course, in Sprint Challenge Brazil. up against a field full of men. She is the one who was the best driver last year. These are very difficult conditions. And don't forget, she's only 18. So this is... Oh, big mission. And Miguel Mariotti spins the car coming out of turn 4. But somehow manages to get the car pointing in the right direction. And Antonella Bassani goes past him on her own flying lap. And the lap time to beat is 2 minute 1.575. The golden rule in this session now is stay on the road. Because if you stay on the road, you've actually got a really good chance of a decent quali lap. Fair play to Bassani. That's a really aggressive line she's taken, but she was able to drive out of it very well. So she's gone a very wide trajectory, a very wide berth on the outside of the curb. But that gives the car a little bit of time to slow itself down, give itself a little bit of biting grip, and she can just drive around, power out of the apex. So it's a very nice stance that Antonella Bassani has in the wet here. And of course, the wet weather conditions are a very good leveler in the world of motorsport. But after the misery of last weekend in endurance between her and Letizia Buffoni, who had a really difficult qualifying and then a very, very difficult race, I'd love to see her back on her form again. So let's see if that's what we get. The time to beat from the rookies is a 2 minute 1.575. I can guarantee you it's not likely to be done in the first lap, because at the moment they're just trying to get the cars dialed in. It's going to take a couple of laps before you get the best out of it. So Antonella Bassani comes across the line. What's her time good enough for? 8th at the moment. That's a 2 minute 4.6, but there's more coming. A 2 minute 4.0 for Christian Moore. So that is very good news indeed for him. So the challenge drivers are already getting in amongst it, but they're not fastest yet. They've got to do a bit more work before we get to that point. And of course, it's the top 10 that go through to the shootout. So it's guaranteed that we'll have Lucas Locatelli, Alcio Feldman-Nito, and Celio Brasil. But how many more of the challenge drivers can go through? Will all 7 of them make it? Oh, big wobble! Big twitch from Caio Castro, and he can't afford not to make it through because he's got a 5-place grid penalty to take into this race. The first race later this afternoon, so he can't afford not to get through to the top 10. Well, Sadek Leiter is the last driver in challenge to come through to finish the opening banker lap, and he's gone 3rd. So Sadek Leiter immediately 2 minute 2.438. He means business. Miguel Mariotti just trying to find a little bit of faith in the car through the left-hand hairpin. Car dials in. Ooh, he runs a bit wide, but on the whole, it's looking a bit better for Miguel Mariotti now. So the car does look like it's a little bit more dialed in, but in these conditions, can you ever really be dialed into the circuit? It's a bit of a lottery at the moment. This is turning into the Powerboat Sprint Challenge of Brazil rather than the Porsche Sprint Challenge of Brazil. So much standing water around the course. On every corner as well. It's not even in patches of the circuit. It's everywhere. This is not an easy circuit to drain either, so you've got to be very careful. Throttle application has to be smooth, careful, mindful. You've got to be respectful of these cars in these conditions, because they will chew you up and spit you out. Antonella Bassani has got into the top 10 and is now going to cross the line to go even quicker by the look of it. Very quick in the 2 sectors. What can Bassani do as she crosses the line this time? P6. So P6 for Bassani at the moment. So that's not a bad place to be. Mariotti immediately goes quicker. So Miguel Mariotti does a 2:02.9. Caio Castro is on a fast lap. So is this man, Sadek Leiter. He was already in 3. He's still in 3. 4th goes Caio Castro. So Caio Castro goes P4. 2 minute 2.515. Now the times are going to start to dial down. We've got 4.5 minutes or so roughly of the session. And these guys are finally starting to get some confidence in these cars on this circuit. But can they beat the time of Lucas Locatelli? At the moment, there's only one driver from the challenge that has not managed to get through into the top 10 of the tables. And that is Andrea Rosario in the number 2 car. Everybody else has made it through. So Caio Chavez is currently looking at getting into the top 10 shootout. So Caio Chavez doesn't want to put his race overalls down just yet. Sadek Leiter goes fastest, 2:01.134, finds 0.4 of a second more than Lucas Locatelli. That guarantees his place in the top 10 shootout. So he doesn't need to worry too much about another lap, really. He can bring it in. Caio Castro, 4th position at the moment, but he wants to get a little bit more than that if he can. Geração Campos has just displaced Miguel Mariotti and Antonella Bassani, as well as Christian Moore as well, by the way. So they've all come through, as a lot of the drivers are starting to find a little bit more of their feet. Here's Antonella Bassani. So what can she do? What were her sector times? Well, Bassani did a 24.2 in the first sector, a 59.8 in the second. That's really strong. So for Antonella Bassani, this could be knocking on the door of the top spot. It's a really fast second sector for her. She comes off the final turn. It's very smooth, not even close to the curb. So Antonella Bassani looking very strong. This is either going to be second or third, I think. As she comes across the line, it's third. Not bad. So Antonella Bassani outpaces Alcifel Manito. Now here's Caio Castro. He's on a quick sector as well. A 1 minute point 63. Oh, actually, on this lap, he's done a 1 minute 6. So he's actually building up to the fast lap. Well on the curbs, unfortunately. That's over the line of track limits. I'm not sure exactly what the track limit policy is in wet conditions, whether they're a bit more lenient with it than usual. As Christian Moore goes up into third position. He goes ahead of Antonella Bassani. Caio Castro is still P6. Doesn't improve on that lap. So there's a bit more to do. But Caio Chavez still finds himself in front of Geração Campos and Miguel Mariotti on the times. So Caio Castro looks like he could... Caio Chavez, I should say, does look like he's going to be making it through to the top 10 shootout. Unless Andre Rosario goes quicker than 2 minutes 6.7. He actually needs to go quicker than Miguel Mariotti's time to get through. That's the 2 minute 2.9. So if you want to get through, you've got to be in the 2 minute 2s. At the moment, I'm afraid to say Andre Rosario is not at that pace. He has just done a quickest first sector, though, 24.6 for him. So we'll keep an eye on this man, Andre Rosario, in the Bomix Porsche. He really needs to find some seconds now. He needs to find some pace. If he can go quicker than Mariotti, we've got a real fight on our hands for the top 10 shootout. But ideally, what he'd like to do is go quicker than Caio Chavez, 2 minute 2.592, because if he does that, then he's guaranteed to go through no matter what happens. If he can outpace Chavez, then he's guaranteed progression to the top 10 shootout. If he beats Mariotti, then Mariotti can just beat him back again. He needs to do a bit more than that. If he can outpace Caio Chavez, then it's job done. What was his middle sector time like? Well, that was a 1:03.0. It's genuinely not far off. Oh no, sorry, that was the driver below him. That's Matthias Roque. So it was a 1:01.9. That's not bad. We might just be able to see him push his way forward here. So Andre Rosario trying his best to make a progress. He needs to get into the top 10. So what can he do as he comes across the line? Andre Rosario, a 2:05.2. He's not quite there. He needs a 2:02.9. And at the moment, Andre Rosario is not quite unlocking the pace he needs, and he's only got this lap to do it. He's got one more lap to try. And then essentially after that point, it's game over. So it's this lap that really counts for Andre Rosario. And it's a tall order. He needs to find a mammoth amount of time. He actually needs to find, to guarantee himself a place through, he needs to find 2.5 seconds. That's a lot of time to find for any driver in any situation. As up the road goes Caio Castro, but he keeps it in a straight line. So Caio Castro will go through, but he's down to 7th place. Time has ticked down to 0. So Caio Castro has at least done what Sungo Kim could not. Let's have another look at it, see what happened. Carries a lot of speed through too. Whoops. But he knows exactly what's coming. So he knows he's not going to get a faster time. He just wants to keep the momentum and the speed in the car, to traverse through the gravel trap, not get stuck, and bring it back to the pits. Good job, Caio. That averts a red flag for us. So he will make it back to the pits. He'll not get another fast lap in because we're out of time. So Sadaglaita tops the table, 2 minute 1.134. Then Lucas Locatelli from the rookies, second. Miguel Mariotti, third from Christian Moore. Antonella Bassani, P5. Alcifel Manito, P6 from the rookies. Caio Castro, 7th. 8th is Chilio Brasil from the sport. Caio Chavez is 9th. And Geração Campos is 10th. And we're waiting to see what Andre Rosario can do with his final lap. But I'm afraid to say it's not good enough. He's done a 2:05.286. It's an improvement, but it's only up to 14th. What a shame. What a shame. So a difficult scenario then for all of the contenders. They've had a very difficult battle. But now we have our top 10. We have Sadek Leiter, Lucas Locatelli, Miguel Mariotti, Christian Moore, Antonello Bassani, Alcifel Manito, Caio Castro, Cherio Brasil, Caio Chavez, and Gerson Campos. They are the 10 that go through to the final session of qualifying here in Porsche Carrera Cup and Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil. And that, of course, is the top 10 shootout. We had a spin there for Sadek Leiter. Despite going fastest, he actually spun off the road up at... now, where's that? That's on the approach to the tight chicane. That's going to be... Trying to do the math really quickly. That would have been turn 7. So Christian Moore getting himself ready for the final top 10 shootout. Sadek Leiter likewise. And all the drivers in challenge except one have made it through. And that's Andre Rosario, who could only go 14th. So we've got 3 rookies, a sport, and 7 challenge drivers battling for the top 10. Tyre pressure is monitored for Antonella Bassani. A very good run indeed for her, and she can be quite positive about getting through the way that she has. Top 5 for her. And top 5 is very competitive in terms of winning the race. Qualifying is not the be-all and end-all, but in a race situation like this, you want to make sure that you come through with a car that's in one piece with very little for the mechanics to do. So you want to make sure that you're in the prime position to take full advantage of these situations. So it's a really good and positive situation now for all of the battles out there on the course. So all of the contenders are now having a really solid race of it. So the battles are raging, and they're going to continue in fine style as we get ourselves ready for the last qualifying session of it all. So as the drivers bear themselves down and get ready for another exciting battle, but this top 10 shootout is going to be very competitive, to be fair. Sadek Leiter, Lucas Locatelli, Miguel Mariotti, Christian Moore, Antonella Bassani, Alcifel Manito, Caio Castro, Cherio Brasil, Caio Chavez, and Gerson Campos. They are the top 10, and they will all be battling to try and get themselves into the hunt for position and hoping to go for pole. So the drivers head out then, green flags at the end of the pit lane, and we can go to battle one more time. It'll be a really exciting end to the qualifying session after what has already been a really tough battle. So let's bring it home. Let's have a fantastic charge and let's bring it home for these final 10 minutes of qualifying as the drivers are bidding to get pole position on the very treacherous Estoril circuit. Not easy in these weather conditions. So as the drivers venture out, still nothing but windscreen wipers to assist the drivers in terms of being able to see where they're going. Cherio Brasil, probably very relieved to be going through after the stop-start nature of the sport category. And he's one of only, well, he is the only driver, I think, from the sport category to have made it through. So he's very, very lucky that he's still in the fight for pole position, really. But it'll be an interesting challenge for sure. It's definitely going to be a different situation for all of the contenders. But there is Cherio Brasil gearing himself up ready for an exciting showcase now for the pole position. This is where it really is a bit of a lottery. And it all comes down to feel. It all comes down to the nature and the style of the flow of the battle for the contenders out there on the course. Antonella Bassani gunning for pole position. Even if she doesn't get it, she's in the top 10 of the grid. So that will definitely help her cause. A bit of battles on track as Gerson Campos wants to be ahead of Miguel Mariotti on the lap. They don't really want to get themselves into hot water, tripping over each other in the wet. They want to make sure they've got plenty of opportunities to make it work. But the top 10 challenge shootout now. This will decide who's going to be on pole position for the Sprint Challenge Brazil race later on today. And of course, they'll take it from the times as well to set the grid for the next race, which is tomorrow. So a lot of intriguing battles, a lot of interest mounting in these races. Obviously, we've got the races coming up later on this afternoon, but they've got a little bit less preparation time thanks to the multitude of red flags we've had for qualifying. So let's hope it's at least going to be a strong and competitive race battle. So let's see how this all finishes up. Hopefully in a fine position. So now the drivers will be crossing the line to start their flying laps. They're not going to get many, especially considering how heavy the weather's got again. If I can believe it, I'm not entirely sure I can, but it looks as though the weather's actually intensified again. So it'll be an interesting situation for all of the drivers out there as they continue to try and find a little bit more pace, a little bit more rhythm in the circuit. They're just trying to find that little bit extra from the car. So certainly some good battles from the drivers so far in the run for qualifying. Autódromo de Estoril, the first one on track from Carlos Chavez and Lucas Locatelli, then Miguel Mariotti, Antonella Bassani, Gerson Campos, Alcifel Manito, Kyle Castro, Christian Moore, and Sadek Leiter, the man who was fastest across the three groups, coming into the top 10 shootout. Now we get to find out who has got what it takes to go for pole position. Bassani looks like she's on a fast lap behind Mariotti. Fastest first sector of anybody is Miguel Mariotti, 23.922. Fastest second sector at the moment is Carlos Chavez, but that's largely because he's the first person to have crossed the timing beacon at the second sector split line. So we still don't really know who has got the second fastest split time as they come through. But let's find out now as the 21 of Miguel Mariotti crosses that timing beacon. 1:1:21, so definitely not the quickest time yet from Miguel Mariotti. Antonella Bassani is actually quicker than him, but not in the first sector. She had a very weak first sector, 26.0, much quicker in the second split. Now, Carlos Chavez is about to cross the line. Autódromo de Estoril has done so, a 2:03.485. And Carlos Chavez, 2:02.327. So those are the first laps coming through then. 5 minutes to go in qualifying, and that's the fastest time from Gerson Campos. Gerson Campos does a 2:01.80. What is Miguel Mariotti going to do? Well, he's just done a 2:03.39. Alcifel Manito, 2:05.20. Antonella Bassani, 2:05.34. Lucas Locatelli's done a very slow banker, 2:25.75. So a long way from pace for Locatelli. And we're still waiting to see what both Christian Moore and Sadek Leiter come up with. And of course, let's not forget the fact that they have actually put themselves on the other side of the circuit away from the traffic. So they've been very smart. The drivers here have all gone out into traffic, essentially. Now, here's Sadek Leiter. He was the fastest initially. So again, if he's got similar confidence in the car, then he's going to come up with a decent time. I can tell you that Christian Moore's about to cross the line, and he'll be pretty quick. Oh, he's only 2/10 down on Gerson Campos. So Gerson Campos still leads the way on a 2:01.80. Sadek Leiter trying to take it away, and he has. Pole position for Sadek Leiter. 2:01.486 for the moment. Very good run indeed from him there. 0.3 of a second up on Gerson Campos. But now the drivers are starting to find confidence in the car. Trying to find a little bit more pace in it too. Here is Gerson Campos, formerly the fastest man. Now finds himself down the order once again. But there's still plenty of time to find a little bit more pace in the car, a little bit more speed. I can tell you that the fastest first sector time is now that of Christian Moore on a 23.7. Everybody else is about 4 to 0.5 of a second away from that mark. But it is very even and competitive at this stage. Through they come once again. Carlos Chavez is on a very quick lap actually as well. As he comes across the line, it's going to be potential that he could go into the top two. He's gone fastest. The rookie has gone 2:01.094. So Carlos Chavez quicker than Sadek Leiter and Gerson Campos. Here comes Gerson Campos over the line. What can he do? He improves to a 2:01.5. It's not good enough for anything particularly special. Through the mist come the other drivers. Miguel Mariotti up to P5. A spin from Caio Chavez as Antonella Bassani goes third. Right, Caio, can you get it out of the gravel? Can you get it out of there? If not, then we're going to go red flag. Oh, goodness me. He's trying to get it going. I wouldn't go forwards. I'd go backwards if I were you. And there's a puncture. A puncture for Lucas Locatelli. Well, big problems. Well, fortunately, Caio Chavez does appear to be getting that car that he's literally just spun off after his pole position lap. He's gone pole, then spun it off. But fortunately, he has got it going again, so we're not going to go red flags. But Caio Chavez is really going to struggle to get that car back up to temperature again in time to put another decent lap together. So if anybody beats his time, he's not going to have any chance of a response. And I'm afraid Lucas Locatelli is going to have a short trip back to the pits with no competitive lap time. He's going to be 10th. So the fastest rookie earlier on is not going to have a lap time, essentially, because he's got a puncture. Limp back to the pits, get back out. Even if he changes it and gets back out there, he won't start another qualifying lap. So Miguel Mariotti currently in behind Celio Brasil, who has done a great job to be fit. Oh, that's Alcifel Manito. Well, that's off at turn 9, and I'm afraid... sorry, no, that's turn 6, isn't it? And I'm sorry to say, I think that might be it for qualifying. He's beached. He's not going to recover that. Oh, he's gone in quite a long way. He was lucky not to hit the barrier on the inside, to be honest. But that car's gone a long way in. And I think that's game over. For all of us. Not just for Alcifel Manito. I mean, he's gone a long way in. They can probably cover that corner with yellow flags if they want to be cautious. But I think pole position might be going the way of the rookie, Caio Chavez. Anybody that's on a flying lap that's already passed the scene. Well, Mariotti's on a quick lap, to be fair. So Mariotti might be able to put something together. Can he take the pole position away from Caio Chavez? Yes! 2 minutes, 0.756 from Miguel Mariotti. He snatches pole. Excellent work from the Oitema Porsche Grand 7 car. So Miguel Mariotti steals pole away from Caio Chavez. Sadaglaita third, Antonella Bassani P4, then Gerson Campos, Caio Castro, Celio Brasil, Christian Moore, and Alcifel Manito, who is beached in the gravel. And Lucas Locatelli, of course, is in the pits. So I think pretty much everybody who was on a flying lap has already passed the scene of Alcifel Manito's car, so they're able to continue the lap under the knowledge that they can cover that corner under yellow flags. So Miguel Mariotti snatches pole position away from the rookie driver, Caio Chavez, who will be on the front row of the grid with him, unless on this final flying lap there can be some improvements. Antonella Bassani's done a personal best first sector, 24.0. Gerson Campos has done a personal best first sector, 23.8. Oh, and a spin. A spin there from Miguel Mariotti. So the pole sitter has spun off on the approach to Alcifel Manito's car. That's going to impede Antonella Bassani, who manages to pass the scene. Well, that's very unfortunate for Bassani, but still, second row of the grid. That's a race-winning position. She can be quite positive about that. So Antonella Bassani trying to come through and finish off the lap in a good position. But obviously she had to back off there in the second sector. So the second sector time is 1 minute 0 compared to those around her who have done 58s and 59s. So there'll be no improvement from Antonella Bassani, but she gets to start P4 on the grid. P5 now, actually, because Celio Brasil has come forward to finish third. Wow. So we've got drivers from 3 different categories in the top 3 positions. We've got a challenge, a rookie, and a sport in the top 3. Well, Antonella Bassani still wants to finish off her lap, even though she's now been displaced as well by Gerson Campos, who's come up to 4th place. Checkered flag for Bassani. No improvement. She crosses the line on a 2:02.1. Her best is a 2:01.4. So Bassani will start 6th now. She's been bumped off the second row down to the 3rd row. I'm still waiting to see if Christian Moore will finish his current lap. Sadaglaita is on the charge for a pole position lap as well. He's gone fastest of all in Sector 2. 58.4 for Sadaglaita. Can he steal pole away from Miguel Mariotti? There was nothing in it between them in the first sector. It's all going to come down to how smooth he can be in Sector 3. And he's done everything bar the final turn. Through the Parabolica Ayrton Senna. Can Sadaglaita snatch away this pole position from Miguel Mariotti? It's going to be close. That is for sure. We're talking a couple of tenths, but he's looked really strong in the third sector. 2 minutes, 0.756 to beat. He smashed it! 2 minute, 0.245. Sadek Leiter steals pole for the Sprint Challenge Brazil. Excellent from Sadek Leiter. Saving the best for last. And he smashes the time. 2 minutes, 0.245. Half a second quicker than Miguel Mariotti. Carlos Chavez third. Celio Brasil fourth. From Gerson Campos, Antonella Bassani, Caio Castro, Christian Moore, Alcifel Manito, and Lucas Locatelli. So Sadek Leiter, who did such a good job last week in the endurance race here at Estoril, in the sprint, in the weather conditions that have been as atrocious as you could ask them to be, has bounced forward and come through for the Sprint Challenge pole. Very good work indeed from the Atlas Schindler roll-on Porsche. And that's exactly what we were hoping to see from him. So an exciting performance and a great challenge. Pole position goes his way. And that will do very nicely indeed. Alcifel Manito's car still abandoned in the middle of turn 7. I'm not entirely sure actually what that's going to mean, because he set his best lap under yellow flags, technically speaking. So I don't know what that's going to mean in the grand scheme of things. Is that going to be a time that he's allowed to keep or not? Interesting. Could be very challenging, could be very tricky from here on out. So we'll have to see if there's any more to come from this conversation. But certainly for the moment, pole position going the way of Sadek Leiter. And he can be very happy indeed with the lap that he has produced. Excellent stuff. Good work. So Sadek Leiter, pole position. Very happy with the way things have currently gone. So let's see how it all continues on. But for the moment, Sadek Leiter in front of Miguel Mariotti, Caio Chavez, Celio Brasil. And then we have Gerson Campos, Antonella Bassani, Caio Castro, Christian Moore, Alcifel Manito, and Lucas Locatelli, who rather sadly didn't really get a chance to get a decent lap in. Let's be honest, he didn't really do anything because the car had a puncture. So a very difficult scenario, a very tricky situation then for the contenders. And a good performance then from Sadek Leiter. He will take the pole position trophy away from Estoril. A good effort from him and a really solid work from all of the drivers. He can be quite happy with the way that this is all balanced out for him. And of course we've got the racing to come a little bit later on. But in these conditions it's going to be quite a tricky race, that's for sure, in both Porsche Carrera Cup and in Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil as well. But Sadek Leiter can soak in the moment and enjoy it as he takes a pole position in horrendous conditions here. He can be very happy indeed with that. And the Atlas Schindler roll-on Porsche will be at the front end of the field after an exceptional display and a great performance from Sadek Leiter. So that will do very nicely indeed for him. And of course, we can focus now on the upcoming races that will be the order and the nature of our battles to come, because we'll have two races back-to-back, of course. The Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil, and straight after that will be the Sprint Challenge, within moments of the race coming to a conclusion, of course. As they have the podium ceremony for Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil, and then they go straight into the formation lap. Rolling start for the Sprint Challenge. It's going to be fascinating to see how they get underway. Few words then from our pole sitter, Sadek Leiter in Sprint Challenge Brazil. Obviously, you can hear all the reactions from that on the website, PorscheGT3Cup.com.br. And you can follow Porsche GT3 Brazil as well through all of the social media channels. And you can follow everything on their YouTube channel for extra content as well. Soak up all the atmosphere and enjoy it from the comfort of your own personal devices. So Sadek Leiter gets the job done in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Brazil. He will start from the front of the grid. He'll have a clear track in front of him, the best place to be on a race circuit like this one. So that means that we've got a really interesting battle across both classes then. In the Sprint Challenge and in Carrera Cup, we'll have some good battles. Caio Chavez gets the pole position amongst the rookie category and third overall on the starting grid. He's a real threat for the overall battle. Sadek Leiter, he gets the pole position in Challenge. Very good work indeed for him. He also gets the overall pole position. And Chilio Brazil, of course, who will get the pole position in the sport category. And he will line up 4th on the grid. Join us later when Porsche, Carrera Cup Brazil and Sprint Challenge Brazil continue the Estoril weekend in fine style. It's been a great battle. We will return in just a few short hours. Bye for now.